Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Scrutiny Committee in our new format. I'm your chair, Councillor Rachel Carnack, and as you are all aware, I hope, the role of this committee is to scrutinise performance and take a closer look at topics of interest across the Council services, making recommendations to Cabinet where necessary. The committee also deals with the call-in of Cabinet decisions and decides whether these decisions should be referred back to the decision maker to think again, but we won't be doing that this evening. Also present this evening, we have Cabinet members. We have the leader, Councillor Alan Baldock, Councillor Alex Ricketts, Councillor Connie Nolan, Councillor Charlotte Cornell. Thank you very much for being here this evening. The Cabinet members have been invited this evening to answer questions about specific issues under their portfolio areas. First, some housekeeping. There's no fire alarm planned for this evening. Should it sound, please leave via the nearest available emergency exit. Two of the closest exits are through the glass door behind you to my left and through the double doors onto the riverside behind you. Please muster at Café des Amis. Members of the public are welcome to make their own recordings of the meeting using whatever non-disruptive methods they think are suitable. I'd also like to remind everyone present that this committee is being filmed and will be available to view in live and archive form via the Council's website. If you are seated in the public gallery, it is possible that the cameras may capture your image and you are deemed to be consenting to being filmed and your image and sound recordings webcast. The meeting is also being minuted. The Westgate Garden gates on the riverside are locked, so members of the public must leave the Guildhall by the side exit behind the glass door. Right, okay. That's probably enough of that. So, Andrea, apologies for absence, please.
We have apologies from Councillors Lee Castle, Elizabeth Carr-Ellis, Joe Howes and Simon Worley.
And substitute members?
We have Councillor Dane Buckman here for Councillor Carr-Ellis, Councillor David Thomas for Councillor Howes and Councillor Pat Edwards for Councillor Worley.
Thank you all for coming this evening as subs. I'd like to ask you, Andrea, as well, are there any declarations that we've received?
None in advance, Chairman.
And does anyone have any declarations they'd like to make this evening? Maria.
Just to declare that I'm a board member for Canenco.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Should we repeat that? That
Yes,
was Rob May, officer, who's also a member of the board of Canenco.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. And if as we go through anyone, as we come to items, if anyone recalls anything, then you can, of course, just say then. Okay, so we have one public speaker this evening who will be heard directly before the relevant item. Minutes of the meeting held on 26th of June, pages 7 to 11. We need to agree that they are true record by general assent. Does anyone have any issues with the minutes, or can we agree? Okay, agreed, thank you. And if members are, we've got a really big agenda again tonight. Hopefully now Scrutiny Committee is going to be changing its format with the new corporate plan, and we'll hear more from Peter later on about this. We should have more reasonable agendas going forward. This is a really chunky one tonight. And if no one minds, I'd like to propose to alter the order of the agenda to move item 8, key topics, which Peter is going to talk to us to the end. So it's probably more suitable there. So if everyone's in agreement with that. Thank you. Okay, well, it means also cabinet members and officers can leave rather than having to wait through that. So, okay, right, well, thank you very much. So item 6, page 12 on the agenda, Canterbury District Community Safety Partnership report back on 23-24 and delivery plan 24-25. we're looking at noting the report of Marie Royal, Service Director, and we also have Harry Russell, who is standing in for Lacey Dixon on the enforcement side, and we also have Chief Inspector. I was trying to remember your times. I might have promoted you. I was about to promote you. Chief Inspector Paul Stoner here as well, if anyone has any questions. So over to you, Mary, Harry and Paul, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, councillors. The Scrutiny Committee fulfils the Council's required role of being the Crime and Disorder Committee. So this committee has a responsibility to have oversight of the work of Canterbury District Community Safety Partnership. Similar time to this last year, we actually brought the priorities to this committee to get them signed off, and those priorities were agreed for a 3-year period because it's recognised that you know some of the priorities that we pull out from the data can't be solved in a single year, so they are rolled over and action is built on as part of the process. So the priorities are based on a strategic needs assessment. So it's based on the data that we receive from all of our different partners. And each year we have a partnership conference to revisit the priorities, revisit the data, and get partners to commit to action as part of the planning process. In addition, this financial year, we also held a councillor workshop with our colleagues from the police to understand what were the ward level issues and priorities that you felt were happening in your areas, to feed that into the action plan as well. You will note that there's some background documents to this report, and that is the terms of reference for the partnership, the structure of the partnership, some of the tactical groups that we have in operation, and some of the minutes from the Community Safety Partnership. We don't propose to go over those tonight, but if any councillor has any questions on those background documents, then do email me and I'm more than happy to run through any questions with you. I think it should be pointed out that you know, everybody's resources are stretched. Each agency has their own priorities, but the partnership gives us an opportunity to actually pull together, target our resources in the best way that we can, and take that collaborative approach. We've just got a couple of two quick presentations to run through, so I'm just going to run through what we've achieved in the last 12 months, and then I'm going to hand over to my colleague Paul Stoner, Chief Inspector for Kent Police, to run through the current picture and give you some headline data. So as you can see, from a strategic point of view, we've got lots of partners. Lots of partners are represented on the Community Safety Partnership, representing the district, representing individual interest groups. And the other thing to say is that I chair the partnership, and from a strategic point of view, there's lots of other partnerships that are taking place where agendas are linked. So we have the health and wellbeing agenda. There are natural links between some of the priorities for health and wellbeing. We have a local children's partnership group, and again, some of the issues relating to young people, maybe antisocial behaviour. They link in through that group as well. We also have the higher further education group, which brings in some of the issues around the universities, students, student safety, and it's all linked together. The report does set out the priorities that were agreed, and those priorities have not changed. If we move on to the next slide. So the first priority was around disrupting serious and organised crime. We have a tactical operational group that runs. That's chaired by our police colleagues. And the point of that group is to bring together lots of different agencies who have different powers. It's about sharing intelligence and agreeing how we target certain issues that arise through that panel. In terms of achievements, it's worth noting that there was a joint operation using partnership powers that took place over the last 12 months. Trading standards were involved in that along with our police colleagues, and there was a seizure of £350,000 worth of illicit tobacco. And from a criminal point of view, that's really positive because we're breaking up those serious organised crime groups. But from a health and wellbeing point of view, the benefits are that illicit tobacco often damages people's health. It might be cheaper to buy, but actually it's damaging to people's health. So it's about disrupting that sort of action. Next slide, please. So the next priority is around antisocial behaviour. We know that antisocial behaviour is one of the top priorities for our residents. We do monitor issues. We've got various teams in the council that work on this, but also we work closely with police colleagues to find solutions to local problems. So in terms of dealing with some of the issues, there's been a lot of work done with the Police's Rural Task Force, lots of targeted operations, criminal cases being taken to court, fixed penalty notices being issued, and also issuing cautions. And from the council's point of view, especially around fly tipping, we've had 5 successful prosecutions at court this year and another 11 pending, because we know the huge environmental impact, we know that the damage it has to community life, and it is a blight in terms of our neighbourhoods. Next slide. The third priority for the partnership that we agreed on was around safeguarding vulnerable people and having that focus. So it is around raising awareness of referral mechanisms and support available for vulnerable people. But it is also about how we look at our prevent duty in terms of extremism, working with partners to develop drug and alcohol strategies and responses, and sort of dealing with domestic abuse and supporting survivors. Some of the key achievements is that South Eastern Railway have joined the Community Safety Partnership, and we did some work around self-harm and raising awareness around suicide prevention. With the bid, we work with businesses in the city centre to look at zero tolerance training and to help taxi drivers, businesses and their staff to identify where people were struggling, people needed support quickly on a night out, and there are a number of safe havens as well around the city that we've been promoting and been able to develop. I think one of the big issues around this particular priority as well is around neurodiversity. So we've been rolling out training to partners, and over 100 partners have been trained to support, again, some very vulnerable people in our communities. Next slide, thank you. The fourth priority is about the nighttime economy, including violence against women and girls. Again, as I've mentioned previously, we've done the zero tolerance training. We've done a Best Bar None scheme, which was led by the police, which we have supported, where we are sort of developing policy and practice for some of the nighttime economy businesses, again to support people, but also to operate in a socially responsible way. We've got the Connected Routes project, which gives people safe routes home through the city. We've got a Safe Zone app, and we promoted the Ask Angela campaign to raise awareness to domestic abuse. Next slide, thank you. The fifth priority was around supporting young people, and some of the funding that we received from various sources we've used actually to support some community delivery of youth provision in our areas where we were experiencing higher levels of antisocial behaviour. We helped to deliver a soccer arena set up in the city centre, which supported diversionary activities for young people, especially at key times where we noted that antisocial behaviour was happening. And we facilitated the gaming bus to visit the city centre a number of times and in locations in Herne Bay as well. Thank you. Next slide just gives you an idea of some of the promotions that we've undertaken. So the zero tolerance, the best barn on, safer streets, raising awareness about domestic abuse. So we're very active in terms of messaging and awareness raising with partners and with our communities. And I am now going to hand over to Paul.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Marie. I'll try and keep this relatively short. There's a lot of data on there, and I appreciate that most of you probably won't be able to see that. So the key headlines for us is a largely positive picture, if I'm brutally honest with you. ASB across the whole force is in decline, and in Canterbury, we've actually seen the most reductions in the east of the county. So to put that into some context, for the rolling year, so from July 23 through to July 24, Canterbury's seen a reduction of 3.5% in terms of its ASB, whereas some other districts across the county have seen increases of up to 21% and 19% in Tunbridge Wells and Maidstone. So for Canterbury to actually have a reduction, certainly in regards to antisocial behaviour, is quite important. For the month of July, which you would expect us to be one of our busiest months, certainly in regards to antisocial behaviour, we actually managed to see reductions of nearly 30% in terms of our ASB. And there is a reason for that, and I'll probably come to that at the end of the slides. I won't dwell on these too much. Recorded crime, so that's victim-based recorded crime, i.e. where there's a victim on the end of it, not necessarily crimes against the state. So victim-based crime is actually down again in Canterbury for the rolling quarter by 13%. And for the month of July, again, it was down by 18%, which is the highest reduction on the east of the county. Going the other way, our solved rates, so the amount of crime we're actually solving, is actually going up, which is good. So crime's going down, but we're solving more of it. That's gone up by 2.1% for the rolling year, and that's gone up from 10.3 to 12.4%. And that's the second highest on the east, and we're actually third highest in the county. This one's a little bit difficult to read for you, but in essence what it shows is the total volumes of crime, and Canterbury being one of the highest in terms of its victim-based volume of crime. So Canterbury, on average, gets about 12,448 crimes in a 12-month period. That's only beaten by Thanet. But of those crimes, we're generally solving around 8% or charging 8% of them. But our solved rate overall is at 12.4%, which is the second highest on east. So bearing in mind the volumes that we're dealing with and the difference between the solved and the charge rate, we're actually doing really well in terms of our performance. Sort of moving in more into the minutiae, the context behind that data. So obviously we have key control strategy crimes. So domestic abuse, for argument's sake, is around the violence against women and girls. Actually, through the partnership working, but also through our safeguarding, we've seen a reduction of 10.5% in terms of recorded crime, which is 257 less victims. But the number of crimes that we're solving in that particular area, bear in mind it can be quite difficult to solve some of those, is actually going up. Another key area for us is hate crime. That's recorded down at the moment, 15%. I know there is a differing view to that in that sometimes it is underreported and that we need to do better in terms of engaging with communities to make them feel safe and trusted that they can come and report things to us. But at the moment, the data is showing that it's down, but our solved rate's going up, which means we're obviously solving more crime again. Again, next one is rape. Again, violence against women and girls. It's the heart of everything we do in terms of community safety partnership working, and a lot of that work is around the nighttime economy. We've got Freshers Week coming up, and we've put a lot of resources into that to try and educate the students as they arrive, but also to make sure that they're safe when they're having a night out. Rape's fallen by 11.4%, but our charge rate is up. It's still low, let's be brutally honest. I wouldn't want to shout about a 6.7 charge rate for rape, but it's such a difficult area to secure prosecutions and to meet the evidential threshold that any increase I would class as a success. Again, another positive, robberies down across the district, and also burglary is down as well, but again, our charge rates are going up. So some of the reasons, or some of the rationale behind that, is that we're pleased to announce that we have increased our beat officers. Hopefully, as most of you know, last year we introduced our new neighbourhood policing model, and that was designed around uplifting. We were supposed to have 18 beat officers across the district, each one having an identifiable ward. We set a time frame of about 12 months to try and get that into place. We're a little bit behind that due to some challenging staffing issues, but we have now uplifted, and we've only got between 2 and 3 vacancies on the team. And we're aiming for 100% staffing in the next couple of months. There will be 4 officers in the city centre, which is good news. Currently, we've only got 2, and that will give us some 7-day-a-week coverage. And the coastal towns are also benefiting and gaining additional officers as well. I would put a caveat to that in that we have merged some of the more rural parts. So, you know, one officer might end up covering 2 or 3 wards, but that's based on the call data, harm scores, and the resource allocation model that we run. But for us, it's a real positive. One area that I just wanted to touch on briefly, and that's around our future plans. So you may see, certainly for those that are over on the coastal towns, an uplift in policing, visible policing presence over on Herne Bay. Hopefully, as most of you know, that area has long been a grip zone, and the grip zones are based on their levels of serious violent crime. We've done some analytical work, and basically the harm score for that particular area has gone up. The other 2 grip zones are Northgate and Westgate, but we've had a real positive impact in those particular areas, and that's actually gone down. But sadly, Heron and Herne Bay has gone up. The number of offences in that particular area has actually remained stable. The difference is the actual level of violence that's been used out there. And as a result of that, we've seen attempt murders and GBHs that have occurred over the past 12 months, which has inflated the score. So we have put in a problem-solving bid, and we've managed to secure £15,000 of money. Most of the issues out on the coast, I think it's fair to say, are probably fueled by drugs and drug-related activity. There is a comprehensive plan that's been put in place. It'll be starting the next week or so, and hopefully you'll see a distinctly visible increase in policing presence out there. But what I want to do is I want to, work with the partnership, and I know Lacey and Marie will support us in this, but also I want to make sure that the councillors are on board with it so that we are spreading a calm message. We don't want to inflame the situation out there. It's not the Wild West by any stretch of the imagination. Other crime in Herne Bay is actually falling. It's just the levels of serious violent crime that we're trying to address and tackle. And hopefully over the next couple of months, you'll see a real uplift in policing presence. And we'll be looking to target the root cause of that and certain individuals who we already know about. And that's pretty much it for me in terms of the policing update. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That's very comprehensive, and I think gives us a good overview of the priorities that we set last year. And Councillor Nolan is Cabinet Member for Community Engagement, Safety Enforcement. Is there anything you want to say, Connie?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say that it is a partnership, and without sort of working in partnership with other agencies, we wouldn't be able to work as effectively as we do. Not one agency has total responsibility. It isn't all the police. It is actually working together and having a collaborative approach. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Yes. Councillor Turnbull.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, it's lots of good stuff in there, and it's really good. I've been particularly pleased to meet our local beat Bobby and see and hear what he's been doing in the area. So there is a lot of good in there, and there are some things going down. It is a very big report, I did notice, and there's a lot, it's about 40 pages here, and there's a lot of duplication, and it makes a lot to wade through when we're very, got lots of things on the agenda. And I just wondered if in future it could be streamlined a bit, so that it's a bit more manageable for us. I was concerned about, in priority 5, about supporting young people, doesn't address the fact that KCC's closed down the youth services. I saw that there's some funding has been come in for a couple of youth clubs, Princess of Wales and Spring Lane. And I wondered if there are any plans to improve youth provision in the coastal towns, because obviously that cuts across quite a lot of the priorities in terms of tackling things before they become a problem, making sure that people have got things to do and things going on, and people who are keeping an eye on things. And certainly for the police, I think it was quite a useful place for them to go to get to know young people, and which obviously makes all that difference, doesn't it, when you're trying to police a community, and you know who people are, and you can just sort of give them have a word. So I'm just wondering, are there any plans for developing youth provision? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think with any of these issues, when we look to target an area, we look at having a tactical group to do that. So as part of some of Paul's work and some of Harry's work, it is about sitting down round the table, bringing in agencies like KCC, Youth Outreach, and any voluntary groups who are working there, and looking at some of those solutions. So it is something that the team considers, and if there is a need for it, then we can offer support to apply for funding for additional provision. So it's something that we pick up and look at on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you.
Sorry. I can probably just add a little bit more to that as well. We obviously have our child centre policing teams who work quite closely with the schools. What we've recently done is we've worked in partnership with Sports Connect, who work through the Violent Reduction Unit, and we've actually trained up across the whole county. This is something that I've delivered on. We've actually trained up about 8 to 10 police officers who are able to go into the community with a bag of footballs or a tennis bat or a tennis racket, and can actually just turn up and engage with the kids for an hour and actually just play football with them and actually put on a session. That for us is around breaking down the barriers between hard to reach communities, but it's also about the kids seeing more than just a uniform, and actually there is a person behind it, and it's about building that trust and confidence. So that is something that's ongoing. It isn't the sole answer to the situation. It is, as Maria said, a whole myriad of different things that we need to address. But through the partnership working that we have got, I'm fairly sure that we'll be able to have some youth provision with the partner agencies we've got. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Mellish.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, with regard to violence in Herne Bay, particularly the Heron Ward, I just wonder, is it a myth or is it reality that those causing the problems tend to be the same group of people and are probably known to the police as well? So rather than this being an increase in the numbers of people committing violence, as it were, is it the same group? Because we know, for instance, in Memorial Park, the harassment of staff there is by the same group of of youngsters, and similarly across Wimborough Square. I suppose my question is, this is not an increase in the number of people coming to Herne Bay to create violence and to mix with those where there's a core of violent people, but rather it's the same people who are known to be violent. And how are we infiltrating, as it were? How are we getting to know those and trying to break that up?
Go ahead.
Yes, 100% correct. It is not an increase in different people coming in. We are very much aware of who is contributing to the violent or the harm score and why it's gone up. We have raised Herne Bay as a hotspot, which basically means patrols will default to that particular area. We have a priority nominal who lives in Herne Bay. Our analytical product has identified that those particular people are the significant drivers behind the increase in the harm score. So if we can resolve those people, the harm score will naturally fall. And we are targeting them through a multitude of ways, and it will be anything from drugs warrants through to closure orders for ASB related matters if we can get their house closed. It'll also be about addressing their underlying issues because they have complex care needs around alcohol and drug addiction as well. So it's not just a sledgehammer to crack a nut. There'll be a wider, more holistic approach to tackling the issues in Herne Bay.
Thank you. And Councillor Thomas first, and then Councillor Buckman, and then.
Thank you, Chair. Coming back to the Heron Ward, what we also have got with the youth is intimidation in some respects from what they're just wearing. You know, they're wearing their face masks, their hoodies and stuff like that. I mean, it's quite difficult. I mean, it's kind of inheritant from the COVID scenario where you're allowed to wear a mask, where everyone has to wear a mask. They're hiding their identity, and some of it is the youth that, for want of a better word, think they're being clever or cocky, for want of a better word, through think that they're the hard men coming through for the future, and it's trying to tackle them, and they almost feel they're above the law, and that's what's coming through with some of the youth now. And it's a few of them, it's a minority rather than majority, and it's trying to organise those type of things. I mean, we've had there's two lads running around on motorbikes at high speed. They're electric, but they're for off-roading, and they're not designed for. But if I report it, they're gone. That's going to be the problem, and it's trying to have situations where they're actually caught and stuff like that. And also, it's the visibility. I mean, I've noticed more police cars. I've noticed a lot of unmarked police cars as well around Herne Bay. So it's all a good thing, trying to focus onto it and trying to sort out these gangs, and it's probably all drug related and this, that and the other. It's not my culture. I don't really understand it. But obviously I'm assuming what's coming in a lot of it in. I mean, you've only got to walk around Herne Bay and you can smell cannabis. I don't know why Herne Bay is so miserable, because it's so everyone should be high as a kite. But you know, it is a lovely town, by the way. But that's the whole point of, you know, that's what comes in. And if someone wants something and they can't afford it, then they're going to take it, and they're going to take something to pay for that, and then the spiral just goes round and round and round. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Buckman.
Yeah, it was just a quick question really regarding like the community payback schemes. I was just wondering, I've probably only seen one litter picking group in the last year in Westgate out picking. So I was just wondering if we had taken full use of that sort of scheme, or whether it doesn't really exist too much now. Thanks.
Who wants to? Harry? Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. So with community payback, and we've been working, I've been speaking to probation quite a lot. The problem we've got is there are very strict health and safety concerns that have to be taken into account. But it's also welfare. So we have to be able to provide a suitable site that has welfare facilities, i.e. a toilet. And that's a stumbling block on a lot of requests for community payback is, okay, we've got this, we've got a field, for argument's sake, a green area that we would like a litter pick. Okay, where's the nearest welfare facility? Oh, it's half a mile down the road. And that's when we have that stumbling block. And it's not as simple as being able to go, oh, we'll deploy Portaloo, because then there's that financial cost with that as well that we've then got to budget for. But we are trying to work with probation to then deliver community payback where it is possible. But we are having those issues.
And Marie?
And we have been actively engaging with the community payback scheme. They've been doing some work in our cemeteries. So that relationship is there, and we're taking up opportunities where we can.
Thank you. And Councillor Edwards?
Yes, thank you. I'm a late substitute, so I may have missed something in these papers. Really good stuff in the report. You would know I would be supportive of a lot of it, especially obviously the partnership working and the achievements. ASB's down, but what I wanted to ask about was the shop theft stuff that I went to a bid meeting not that long ago, and it was a big topic. I know it's a national problem. I know it's not local. And I say I may have missed something because I've only been able to skim the papers for today, but I just wondered how we were doing with that, and how much that was featuring in the work we were doing. You said more police in the city centre. Well, that's going to be good. So an update on that. And the other thing that's a particular issue for me is the off-road biking, which is in and out and around Old Park, that I particularly have an interest in. That in Barton, it means that they're off-roading in through the estates. And with Connie, I did meet the local officer last week, and I know that, they have been targeted, but you can't just target, occasionally. They have to be a permanent. It's not probably with Herne Bay the same. It's not going to go away. These are kids probably, recently coming from Querns and Spring Lane, but into, and particularly driving the bikes through and across Royal Parade, which is very worrying. I mean, I don't think they should be going to Old Park either, and we've got that to deal with, and there will be reports. But, I think that we did have a couple of good, the Rural Crime Force, Task Force had a couple of big events around it, really got hold of the people who were bringing bikes in by the vans from different parts of Dover, South London. And I know there has been one by yourselves more recently. And that's all good, but I'm just really highlighting that it's never a one-off with that. They come back, and I know that Jason Hedges identified a particular family, and I know that was looked at, but it has to go on. It's like an ongoing. So I just want to check in that it is an ongoing concern, and that we will be keeping an eye open for the off-roaders who are, potentially quite dangerous. The site on the front where we actually met the officer the other day is a playground, and they go straight across it. They don't care about the kids. So, we just want to stop that really and keep an eye on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Paul.
Thank you. I'll address the issue of shoplifting first. We picked up on the shoplifting crisis, or the rising trend of theft shoplifting, probably about 18 months ago, long before it actually became something in the national media, partly because we look at the crime statistics. We implemented Op Odin, which has now been rolled out pretty much across the whole of the East Division. And Op Odin is essentially the targeting of shoplifting in the city centre. It's also targeting the violence against shop staff, because the two sometimes go hand in hand, which then features into the violence against women and girls strategy as well. We've had some real great successes over the past 12 to 18 months with that. Most of our top 20 offenders have been arrested, charged, remanded, sent to court, sent to prison, back out again, and then re-arrested. It is unfortunately a cycle that we go through. But what I would say, the successes we have had in the city have now resulted in us pushing them out of the city, because we've been given them bail conditions, and are now our hotspot, if you like, for retail crime is actually outside the city. So we're now having to deploy officers to that area to try and target that side of it. But shoplifting does remain a focus for us. It is something that we take very seriously, but it also leads in slightly to the off-road motorbikes, insofar as we can only really target these things on specific days where we have days of action. And the reason for that is because everything is RAG assessed, if you like. It's the threat, risk and harm that is associated with that. Bearing in mind the demands that we have around nighttime economy, the violence against women and girls, we run Project Vigilant, which is targeting predatory male behaviour in the city centre. That's a bit like the Thought Police, where we try and identify males who may be lurking around at 2 o'clock in the morning, potentially preying on a vulnerable victim, and it's about our engagement in that. Now, if we're targeting that side of things, our resources are focused in that particular area. It's very difficult to also then focus on other issues that are arising within the community. Hence the reason what we end up doing is almost having these days of action that are planned in, where we can flood a particular area with the resources we've got and get, for the want of a better phrase, get our biggest bang for our buck, and then obviously publicise that. The issues with the motorcycles generally tend to be seasonal. generally tend to be towards the start of the summer and then over the summer period. And obviously they generally tend to be at the weekends as well. And we have had, as you quite rightly said, some notable successes with targeting that. But you're absolutely right. 1 day of action or 2 days of action are not going to solve the problem. We need to get to the underlying root causes, which generally tends to be around education, as well as the other side, the prevention and seizing their bikes and then taking prosecutions, which we have done. But it's something that isn't going to go away. The same as shoplifting isn't going to go away. It's about us working with the stores to try and target harden and make it more difficult. But also we've got to address the underlying reasons to why people shoplift, which is your alcohol, your addiction and your mental health problems. So, and that's where the partnership working comes into play. It's not just a policing issue, it's a wider partnership issue that we need to address.
Thank you. And thank you. And Councillor Mackenzie.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Afraid I've got two completely different questions for you. So, the first one is, I was wondering if you are aware, a lot of my residents and parish councillors in Surrey, Hurstone and Fordwich have raised with KG&I a few months ago about teenagers who would hunt small animals with slingshots and other small projectiles, and then pose with them on social media. So I was wondering if this sort of animal abuse has continued in some ways. I mean, the other day, I'm aware that a police officer interviewed one of the managers at the McDonald's on St George's Street about a teenager who grabbed a pigeon and abused it. So I'm just wondering, is the Alliance aware of teenagers engaging in this behaviour and what you're doing about it? That's the first question. The second one is, this might be a bit outside of this report's remit because it's so recent, but I feel like because it's current events, it's worth asking about. With the far-right riots that happened only a couple of weeks ago, did we see any spikes in hate crime in our district? And if I may take this opportunity to thank the police and the council enforcement officers and everyone who was involved with keeping our city safe on that night where there was due to be a riot in our city.
Yeah, thank you, Paul.
Yes, we are aware of the animal cruelty offences. They're predominantly predicated by youths. We are aware of the one more recently at McDonald's with the pigeon. We have got a suspect for that, and that has been crimed, and they are going to be dealt with for it. So yes, it is something we haven't seen as much. It did sort of peak over the summer period. It has died off a little bit more recently with regards to that and the slingshots. And I'm aware that they weren't just killing animals, they were actually causing damage to people's houses as well. And we did increase our policing presence. And it again, unfortunately, comes back to it was the one or two minority that would commit a disproportionate amount of that crime. But it is something that we are aware of. In relation to hate crime, yes, we did see a little bit of a spike. But when I say a little bit, we're talking about 10, maybe half a dozen offences more than what we would normally see. We also had the large contingent of Jewish families that came down from Golders Green who stayed on the university campus. That passed without incident. There was no reported hate crime in relation to them. Most of the hate crime that we saw was online. We had no real significant issues within the Canterbury district or even Kent. And where there was reports of potential gatherings, Kent stood up a contingent of officers and they were deployed to the area pretty much straight away. Most of what was on social media, I think, was fake news. I think Connie even went to one location and updated that there was nobody there whatsoever. So, you know, touch wood, it passed relatively lightly for us. But thank you for your comments.
Thank you, Councillor Jeep.
I just wanted to note, because Harry reminded me of it, RE, the so-called riots, the University of Kent and the mosque are both in my beautiful and best ward, Blean Forest. A group of us visited the mosque on that week, spoke to a good few people there from the women and the men. All of them felt safe. They've never had incidents, all of the ones that I spoke to, had never had any incidents of hate crime to themselves in this area. They hadn't heard of anything in this area. Just wanted to say thank you for your, presence on that night. and, you know, for helping that everyone feel safe.
Thank you, Councillor Dupe. Yes, Councillor Nolan.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to echo Councillor Dupe and Councillor Mackenzie's thanks. And it was an excellent example of how well all the agencies work together. The British Transport Police, you know, Kent Police, the enforcement officers, the security guards at Whitefriars, Right Guard Security, Axon Security, and you're quite right, Chief Inspector Stoner. Chief Inspector Stoner. I was so concerned about the fake news that was circulating that I did come out, and in fact my friends accused me of being Trump because I kept replying to it all as fake news. But thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nolan. Councillor Turnbull, yeah.
Am I allowed to speak again? Very quickly, it's just an observation, really. I mean, we're all taking opportunity to talk about issues in our wards because we've got Chief Inspector here, which is great. And I'm just wondering if maybe that we need some sort of forum where councillors can meet separately from this, because obviously this is a scrutiny committee where we're here to sort of look at a particular report, where councillors get a chance to sort of get this sort of feedback and from the police, because obviously it's very
thank you. Well, we had the all councillor briefing. Do we have another opportunity for that at some point?
Thank you. I can't remember if it was before or after the last election, but I certainly emailed every single councillor with an invite to come in and speak to me as the CSU inspector. And I'm sure I see some familiar faces that did turn up and make that opportunity. I'm more than happy to have a one-to-one with somebody if they want to come in and talk about the issues that they've got within their wards. I can send out another email so you've got my contact details, or if you've got them already, just email me and we'll make an appointment.
Mellish.
Just on a similar theme, Chair, that there are about regular, but there are forums, or rather meetings with the local police in Gordon Road. Usually come to the to Wimbledon Square, and I've taken this so people can go in and talk to them. You know, local residents can go and speak to them. And I sometimes take advantage of that, just go and speak to the local bobby about what's going on. Sort of get some sort of feedback that way. But they are quite regular. So if they're not happening in your area, then perhaps we should be asking for those to take place.
Thank you, Councillor Mellish. And I think quite a few of us go to those and meet our local PCs. I wanted just to say that I think the neighbourhood policing the change has been welcomed, and I know from some of my residents that they see a bobby on the beat. They've actually been quite surprised that there are foot officers around, which is great. But my concern, being a rural ward councillor, is still rural areas, and I know the PC that covers my area is also not only covering an urban area but also a very rural area. And I don't know what other rural councillors feel, but I really feel there's been an uptick in intimidation, antisocial behaviour and low-level abuse in rural areas, and there is quite a lot of fear amongst people, and I think maybe that's one thing that could be looked at. And again, it's partner working, because there's a lot of enforcement action at the moment in parts of my ward, and I think it's really important for local communities to feel that they're not under siege. So yeah, I think that would be helpful. And then my only final one was talking about Heron. I know Chief Inspector Stoner, you've been working on a project as well, trying to look at accompanying children leaving Herne Bay High, and I've sort of trying to keep up on that, but I think that's something that maybe we could do with a little bit of help, a bit of a boost, and maybe again with the partnership working, Councillor Nolan, that's something that we could all look at in helping in Herne Bay at the moment. Might be useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I just want to, reiterate the point. Herne Bay is not the Wild West. It is a lovely place to live. It is not a massive concern for us. We are putting more resources into it because the data suggests that we need to. But and the message I want the councillors to try and spread through the press and through the online is that we are addressing the issues. There will be an increased police presence. If people ask you why there's so many police officers out there, it's because we're trying to keep them safe and try and prevent and deter crime. And as part of that, obviously, is the partnership working, and also the schools have a big part to play in that around education of the children. And obviously, our child centre policing team work very, very closely with the schools. And that's it. It's just, that key messaging has to be, it's all right, we're working on it, please don't panic type message.
Panic, yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much. I think if we've covered all of that, I'd like to thank Marie Royal, Harry Russell and Chief Inspector Paul Stoner for being here this evening, and also Councillor Connie Nolan, and we'll look forward to seeing you in a year's time, I guess, roughly. Right, then we're just going to have a little bit of a shift round, so that while some officers move and some officers move in for our next item. Yeah, okay, right, thank you. Thank you, Connie. Right, item 7 is Park and Ride 6 monthly reporting. This is an item that Scrutiny Committee asked to come back with the reopening of Surrey Park and Ride.
Are we not agreed to note the last report?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Sorry, I'm getting carried away, aren't I? Yes, well done. Well done. Yes, we need to note the last report. I think we just have one comment, which was from Councillor Turnbull, if we can streamline the reports a little bit. But other than that, can we note that report? Yes. Yeah, great. Thank you. Right, moving on then. Item 7, Park and Ride 6 monthly reporting. As I said, this is a report that this committee asked for with the reopening of Surrey Park and Ride, particularly, but also with the new administration's policy of bus first, and looking at the changes in the local plan and moving more to bus transport and fewer people coming into the city centre of parking, which would be a priority in this local plan. We have one public speaker on this item, Councillor Andrew Harvey, and we also have Richard Moore here, Head of Transport and Environment, and Bill Hicks, Service Director. And we also have the Cabinet Member, Councillor Alex Ricketts, who's Cabinet Member for Tourism and Transport and Rural Champion. So if I can ask Councillor Harvey if he would like to speak first, please, to the report.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Most of you know me. My name's Andrew Harvey, and as well as being a councillor, I live in Broomfield and frequently come into Canterbury. Just wanted to say a few words about this report, mainly pertaining to Surrey Park and Ride, because that's the one I'm most familiar with. There are 3 main aspects that I feel we should consider. First big one, of course, is the financial cost, which is huge, with the bus contract alone costing around £1.5 million per year, which works out about £1,300 per day for each site. The second issue is the huge environmental cost. Looking at the use of Surrey over the summer, we've got around 93 cars per day using it on average. And we've also got between 70 and 80 bus journeys servicing those 93 cars, because there's a bus every 7 minutes. So effectively, we're almost replacing each car with a bus, which is clearly ludicrous. I think you see the report admits that this is adding a net 143 tonnes of carbon dioxide per year. And after having declared a climate emergency, it just seems ludicrous to be adding more climate changing emissions. I don't think that shows the whole picture, because the buses we're using are the most polluting diesel buses. Even though they're Euro 6, which is latest standard, it's still a minimum standard of emissions and pollution, and I think that's a very low bar for us to be aiming for. Third aspect is the local air pollution. I'd like to consider being distinct from the carbon emissions, because these diesel buses, while much better than the older ones in not producing so much of the NOx particles, they're still churning out a cocktail of poisons, including carbon monoxide. Anyone here who cleans their own car will also be aware of the horrible brake dust that covers your front wheels. And you can only imagine how much more is produced by a 10-ton bus in stop-start traffic, together with larger amounts of tyre particulate. All of this is going into the air in areas that frequently breach World Health Organization air quality limits, and then ends up being washed down our drains and into our rivers and seas, which have got enough pollution already to cope with, I think you'll agree. The report also suggests that closing the park and rides would require 750 extra parking spaces in Canterbury. I don't think that's correct, because when we had the initial report into reopening Surrey Park and Ride, it did suggest that there would be little impact on parking revenue in the city centre, which suggests that the journeys using the park and ride are actually additional ones that would otherwise be made on other forms of transport. We are therefore actually encouraging car journeys and adding to congestion and pollution. Solution, I think we should seriously consider renegotiating the stagecoach contract. These diesel buses, some of them are double deckers, they could easily be replaced by 7 or 9-seater electric vans that would comfortably do a day's work on one charge and then be recharged at night when our grid is greenest and cheapest. Or perhaps, bearing in mind that nearly 40% of users responded to the survey said they would use it more if it was cheaper. So I wonder if this administration ought to keep their pledge to have the service free for local residents. We might then see a lot more usage, which would reduce the carbon dioxide emissions per passenger. One thing I forgot to mention as well when I was writing that was the noise, of course, of these diesel buses. All those people who have the misfortune to live along Surrey Road there have a lot more diesel buses clattering past all day. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harvey. Right, Richard Moore, do you want to?
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
I'll go through the report and I'll hopefully pick up most of Councillor Harvey's points as I go through. But the report does answer the specific questions that this committee asked for. But obviously, I'm happy to answer any other questions that might come to mind. We spoke about usage, and the figures here do show, I've given all 3 sites, steady increase at all 3 sites. Surrey Road in particular is what we were obviously talking about at the last meeting. And I've got the figures for August for Surrey Road, and it's 3,252. So that increase that we've seen in the first 4 months since opening has carried on to the 5th month. Those 5 months combined, when you compare that to the 5 months prior to closure, represent a 30% increase. So that's probably above what I had hoped for. But let's not kid ourselves. They are still pretty low figures, and this is just the start. And I'm hoping that this trend will continue. The combined usage of all 3 sites represents 77% of the pre-COVID level. That's our first target. That's where we need to get to, first of all, get back to where we were prior to the pandemic. New Dover Road's already there, or thereabouts. Wincheap, some way behind. And Surrey Road on our current figures is about half of what we had before. So that's clearly where we hope that the increase will come. The committee asked for length of stay. I think it doesn't tell us too much, really. We knew that the length of stay at park and ride sites was greater than the city centre. In the city centre, you're looking at 1.5 to 2 hours on average, pretty low. So we're double that at park and ride sites, and New Dover Road is slightly longer stay than the other 2. Yeah, the raw data on income does show that the service is subsidised. But I think, as Councillor Ricketts said before, this administration wants to consider park and ride as it is an integral part of the parking supply for the city. And so, yeah, just looking at the economies in isolation doesn't tell the whole picture. We need to look, we make a huge amount of money through city centre parking, and I think it's right that a more environmentally friendly service is subsidised. If we can get back to pre-COVID level, it will break even. So that, again, that's the target. If you look at the raw data on carbon, yes, pre-COVID, it was showing a positive 140 tonnes per year, and the current figures do show a negative carbon emissions figure. Again, that's not where we want to be, and if the trends continue, then I'm sure that in the next year or so we will be up to where we were before, and at least breaking even on that carbon number. It doesn't tell the whole picture. If we didn't have park and ride, we would have a huge problem in the city, because the 750 is the 3 sites, all 3 sites. I was thinking if you close all 3 sites, you'd have to find 750 spaces. And we know there's no space in the city to actually meet that demand. So park and ride, provides that demand, and it's because it's on the outside of the city centre, then it is less environmentally damaging than cars coming right into the centre. The survey feedback's in Appendix 1. I've drilled down a little bit. You won't have this just on the Sturry site. Just a couple of things that are different from the other sites. The reasons people use Sturry Road, greater emphasis on working and shopping, but less emphasis on for those who are studying and tourism. And the other big sort of anomaly in the stats was that the resident rate awareness, that those users of Sturry Road, 73% of those we interviewed were aware of the resident rate, but only 40% at the other 2 sites. So it shows to some respect that our marketing has worked well in targeting the people using Sturry Road, and it obviously gives us food for thought on how we target people who use Wincheap and New Dover Road. I won't go into marketing. It's a lot of information there on what we've done. And I think the longer term, this is, I think, really the key to this is the longer term targets. How are we going to increase that patronage? One of my next reports that I bring to these committees will be the off-street parking places order. And one of the things that we want to introduce is some additional permits for park and ride users, particularly aimed at businesses and students as well. So watch this space for that, but hopefully that will be coming forward. Redistribution of parking supply. I've spoken about this many times before. Gradually, we need to shift the amount of spaces we've got in the city centre to move outside. That redistribution of spaces will also increase patronage. The other thing I think is really a key, and picks up Councillor Councillor Harvey's point, which was on carbon, is the importance of the next contract with whoever it may be with Stagecoach, may not be with Stagecoach. We'll start looking at that in a year's time. We will certainly have an ambition to have electric buses in there. Clearly, they need to be affordable, and we need to look at that in the round. But that's the aspiration. Cost and bus priority measures and all those other things will all help, I think, increase patronage in the longer term. I think I'll stop there. Hopefully, I've answered your questions. I hope I'll answer any other questions you may have too.
Thank you, Richard. And Councillor Ricketts, do you want to say anything?
Have you ever heard me not want to say anything, Chair? Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Richard, for that report as well. I was actually going to say that despite the positive numbers, we shouldn't get carried away. But luckily, Councillor Harvey turned up to make sure that we couldn't get carried away. So I think when I was here before, and as Richard rightly said, I wanted to view the parking system in the round. We need to look at park and ride as part of the strategy within the whole district, because I think looking at individual car parks themselves, I think, doesn't tell the whole story. Surrey Park and Ride, the rest of the park and rides play a huge part in what we're trying to do with journeys into the city centre, and hopefully in the future what we would want to do with journeys into the coastal towns as well. However, I completely understand why this committee wants to talk about Surrey Park and Ride. It was a big item previously. And I think, to a certain extent, cautiously, I can say that we're moving in the right direction with it. What we said was going to happen has broadly happened. And I think that there are some really, really strong signs here that we're moving in the right direction to a place where we can consider this a success. I don't think we're there yet. And as Councillor Harvey points out, there are lots of issues we need to tackle. The biggest one of those, specifically with the park and ride itself, is of course the type of buses we use. We're slightly in the hands of Stagecoach. We're also looking at using a contract that was negotiated some time ago. I know there was a lot of pressure for that to include electric buses and for those bus routes to be looked at the time. But we are where we are with that. And that was a case of when reopening the park and ride, we had to go with the original contract. But as Richard said, we've got the opportunity to look at that soon. And I think, as you can see from the wider transport strategy, the direction we'd want to travel in would be to massively reduce those emissions, and changing the type of buses is the easiest way to do it. So I do agree with Councillor Harvey on one thing. I won't go into the things I don't agree with him on. I think we've rehashed this one a few times. I suspect other members of the committee would want to talk to them about it. But I think the overall picture is worth looking at, that we have park and ride usage increasing. Surrey Road Park and Ride is at a level much higher than it was before it was closed. We have an overall increase of 1% in parking acts and an increase in revenue of 10%. I think there's good news here, and I think that there's a demonstration that what we're trying to do with parking and taking a strategic approach, even though there's some short-term pain, shows that we're actually moving into a position where we can not only secure the finances of the council, but we can reduce congestion in our major population centres and move towards a point at which we can have a much greener, much fairer and much more efficient parking and transport system in the city. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ricketts. I'm sure there'll be lots of people who want to comment on that. Before I come, can I just ask, when is the Park and Ride contract going to be looked at again? Because it must be due, isn't it? Must be very close.
I think it's got
a detailed question. It's got to be Richard.
It's at least another year.
Yeah. It's not long, is it? So it will come within the purview of this committee then within the next year. When this report comes back 6 monthly, it will be around that time to have a look at it. Thank you. Right, Councillor Prentice, you were first, then Watkins, Councillor Mellish and Councillor Turnbull and Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Chair. And first of all, I just want to say I am really pleased that we are broadly going in the right direction with park and ride usage, and it is a reflection of the priorities of this administration. I do understand that we're not quite at the destination we'd like to be at in terms of usage, but we're going in the right way. I just want to note a few things ever so briefly. Obviously, Councillor Harvey has made comments regarding air quality. We shouldn't throw aside, but I do note that the incumbent operator has gone to some efforts to make sure it is using the most up-to-date vehicles. I think even in the last few weeks, it's introduced 4 brand new double-deckers, latest registration, cleanest engines. You can't get cleaner than that without having electric buses. I do want to make a point about the rest of the sort of types of transport that use those main arteries into Canterbury. So whether you're talking about New Dover Road, Wincheap, or New Dover Road, Wincheap, or Stowe Road. That's it. How could I forget Stowe Road? Obviously, there's a lot of vehicles that use them, and we are putting quite an awful lot of. We are holding to account an awful lot one particular bus service that use one particular road. In terms of Stowe Road, there's an awful lot of vehicles that use Stowe Road that don't get sort of, held to account for their emissions. So you can you can chug into Canterbury in a vehicle that can be very, very polluting indeed, and it's certainly not as clean as some of the latest park and ride buses. So I do want to make that point, because I think when this point is made about park and ride buses not being the cleanest they possibly can be, there's an awful lot of bus services that use those roads already, and if we were to suddenly take those off the road, then people would be in a very, very difficult position because they wouldn't have access to public transport. I don't think we should be holding Surrey Road Park and Ride to such a high standard, because I think we need to be a bit fairer about all of the transport modes. The point I was going to make, just coming back to air quality, is around if we are looking at retendering the contract in a year, there's some really good practice going on elsewhere in Kent, up in North Kent and in Dover, where the fast track services, one's been quite well established by KCC, and there's another one coming on stream in Dover quite soon. I think one of them is using what's called pantograph charging, which is where you get the electric power is drawn from above, a bit like you would with overhead railway electrification. Is that something we could consider here, if that's something that could be fitted on park and ride sites where the bus can recharge quite quickly and then be on its way again? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Prentice. I must say, I've always liked a double-decker, but I don't like seeing a double-decker with just a driver and possibly one other passenger on it. I tend to agree with Councillor Harvey that I think there are other options that, you know, OK, we've got a year, but we need to be looking at other options. And when it comes to things, there could have been a nice bypass that would have meant that none of those trucks came through the city centre. But there we go. But either Councillor Ricketts or Richard, do you want to comment on that?
Of course I do. I would ask you to speak to Richard about the overhead charging of buses, or actually even better, direct that to Stagecoach, to be honest with you. We are slightly at the mercy, completely at the mercy of Stagecoach. It should be noted, we do not procure the buses. We don't choose which buses go. We're simply allowing Stagecoach to carry out within the parameters of the contract agreed some years ago. So much as I would love to march into Matthew Arnold's office and tell him, in fact, he'd be really happy if he could buy a load of new buses. I know that he absolutely would love to run top of the line, completely non-polluting buses if he possibly could, but we are where we are with that at the moment. But rest assured, the pressure from this council will always be to make sure that our contracts are serviced by the most minimally polluting methods possible, whilst obviously bearing in mind the financial cost.
Okay, thank you. And did you want to add anything?
Only in the last contract, we did have an electric bus option. Stagecoach's option was to charge at depots because it was a much cheaper solution than the pantograph solution. We'll do the same again. I suspect off-site charging will be cheaper.
Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Prentice. And I think next it was Councillor Mellish, was it, before Councillor Watkins? Yes, Councillor Mellish.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take that one. Maybe we won't be at the mercy of Stagecoach if the government's legislation on returning bus services to local government actually comes to fruition. I just really had to go two questions, I suppose. You say that we've got a monthly income of, after 3 months, we've got an income of 1.03 million. And that looks, and we pay Stagecoach 1.4 million a year. That looks like predicted income of £4 million. Am I correct in saying that?
No, that's the predicted income for 12 months.
Yes.
After 3 months of the financial year. So that 1 million is the whole forecast income.
Oh, I see. So big one. Right. Okay. So in fact, we will be in deficit in terms of what we're paying. So that's good. My second question was. I see that the major users of the service seem to be from City One, the city centre, or the city environ, shall we say. And obviously, on the Surrey Road, which obviously where I'd be interested in being a Heron Ward councillor, was to try and encourage usage from the coastal towns, to stop that sort of to cut down the number of cars coming from our district. I just wondered why that predominance and what we might do to actually encourage people to use the park and ride from the coastal towns? And also, whether the question has been asked, are people coming from the coastal towns in that numbers? I mean, are they shopping more locally rather than coming into Canterbury? Are there other issues? Are they coming into Canterbury and not therefore not using the park and ride service? You can see what I'm getting at in terms of there's not the right. Are the people actually going to be using Canterbury in the same way? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Mellish. Yeah, I think that's a good question. It's something I think probably all of us want to know is how do we get more people using it? So I know, Richard, you mentioned about the permit scheme, and maybe Alex could speak more about attracting students and businesses to use Park and Ride more. And we know that for students, Surrey Road Park and Ride should be the one that they're using. And I just wondered if you could let us know your thoughts and plans on that, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. A couple of things on that. First of all, we should thank the BID who've helped us convene a couple of meetings together. We've had some really, really good meetings, both with educational establishments and with local businesses, and some conversations that are ongoing outside. I'm not entirely sure where we are with some of those conversations, so I'm not entirely sure if I can mention them, because some of them will have commercial implications. But it is definitely our ambition, and as we said when we initially looked at reopening Surrey Park and Ride, one of the heaviest user groups was the Canterbury Christchurch Uni. There is some evidence that students are using it again, perhaps not as heavily as they were before. We're still investigating ways that we can do those permits. There are a lot of technical details, particularly with some of the other educational establishments, of creating white lists of numbers and seeing who administers the scheme. I know we had one issue where there simply isn't the staff to administer a scheme with one organisation, so we're looking at what we can do to help them with that. So there are a few problems to overcome, but those conversations are happening. It's something we really, really want to explore. We have this resource where we're trying, the point of Park and Ride not necessarily at the moment producing the revenue that directly pays off the contract. The reason of looking at that as a whole parking thing is that we want to use Park and Ride to shift journeys out of the city centre, and a big way of doing that would be to talk to businesses and the educational institutions and seeing what we can do with favourable financial terms to make that happen. So there are a lot of those conversations happening, and hopefully we'll be able to report a few more of those, and that will show in the figures as we come through.
Thank you. And as Councillor Mellish, with Richard as well, but as Councillor Mellish asked as well about encouraging coastal users, what are you doing?
That's the point I was going to try and make. Actually, the data, if you extrapolate the data just for the Surrey Road site, you haven't got it, but I put it in front of me. You'll see that the CT6 is the predominant origin postcode. So most of the people who use Surrey Road are coming from that CT6 area.
Sorry, Chair, can I just come back sorry, I'll come back on that one. I know it's from the figures that you circulated to us. It was the highest that came was still CT1, and there's only about, in terms of that survey, it's very bad, very poor survey. Yeah, but there's only 8 coming from the CT6 area. I'd say it's a very small survey anyway, but if that's an indication of use, then I don't think it's a particularly good use, particularly from CT6, which is Herne Bay, of course.
Thank you, Councillor Mellish. Yes, Councillor.
I think we've just worked out the confusion. So that's the respondents to the survey, which is a very small pool. What Richard's got is the actual ANPR data, which shows CT6. So people who live in CT1 obviously like answering surveys more, but people who live in CT6 actually park there.
Okay. Right, Councillor Watkins.
Chair, before I say what I'm going to say, I'd like to remind people that I am a big supporter of the bus industry. I chaired the Kent Enhanced Bus Partnership for 2 years, and as well as the 2 fast-track boards, which Paul rightly says, the one up in Thameside is a huge success and actually a model of what a really good bus service can deliver for people. So I would love to see Park and Ride do well. And looking at the data, and I thank officers for the report, I think, I would summarise it by saying New Dover Road is doing well. Wincheap is doing okay-ish. But I cannot get as excited as some of the people who've spoken this evening about the performance of Sturry, which I think looks very poor. And I share Councillor Harvey's massive concerns about the environmental damage we're doing, having opened this, or reopened this. And obviously, I've said all this before. Many of us have said this before, and it doesn't give us much joy to come back here and say, well, look, what we thought might happen has happened. But it's a low level. That's why, it's 1 and a bit cars per bus. That's why it's not succeeding, Sturry. And I'm only talking about Sturry because the other two are doing okay. It's at a low level, but a few people have said, yes, but we've got growth since we opened. But if you look at the chart, 2.1, you can see quite a lot of seasonality, very strong seasonality in the data month to month. So January being the worst month, and then it broadly moves upwards through the year, reaching a peak in December, and then it drops down again. So we're looking at 4 months and saying, well, the 4th month is better than the 1st month. But that's seasonality. A lot of that is seasonality, because July is always better than April. So what I'm saying is that we can't look at this data and even be that sure there is any growth. It could just be seasonality. We could get round to January and we'd be back get round to April, which is the 1st month, isn't it? April 24. So we get to April next year and we might say, oh, you know what, we're back at 2,400 again. Because this doesn't tell us that we're getting better, and we're starting from such a low base. And that's why there's a £400,000 a year subsidy. And it is worth remembering there's a real cost to that subsidy, because the council put up parking rates on the coast and also in Canterbury hugely to pay for this park and ride to reopen. And even if, because of the transport strategy of the council is about higher parking rates and they're going to stick whatever, well, that £400,000, in fact, all the £5 million surplus is used to prop up essential services. That's how the finances of this council work. So that £5 million that we're on track to make doesn't justify just putting £400,000, in the bin because we have a ideological desire to keep over a park and ride that's not doing well. The £400,000 could go into services which aren't performing that well if we didn't have Sturry Park and Ride. Housing, waste collection, just to name a couple. That is the real cost. So I appreciate it's part of a bigger practice, and I actually also appreciate it's far too early to draw conclusions. But I can't get very excited about this data, as an understatement, and we'll look at it again in 6 months' time. But I would ask, it's a political decision. It's not for the officers to say. I would be interested to see what the cabinet member says. At what stage does the loss go on for too long? Do we keep doing it? Do we keep saying housing, waste collection, etc.? You can't have that £400,000 because we've still got 82 people using park and ride in Sturry, even though there are loads of buses along that road as well, which they would use as an alternative. So I asked that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Councillor Ricketts.
I should have waited for you to ask me to answer before I press the button, sorry. Thank you, Councillor Watkins. I'm glad. I thought for a moment you weren't going to say anything and I was a bit worried, but I'm glad the double act with Councillor Harvey's back in play. Just on one point is we do have apples and apples there. We've got June 2022, June 2023 and June 2024, and you can see that June 2024 is larger than both of those. If you look at the data table rather than anything else. So you can compare, there is a significant rise on previous months in previous years. What we're not at, But
Sturry was shut.
But
I meant about Sturry.
Not in June 2022, it wasn't. So what you can do is you can compare what it was pre-closure to what it is now. So it's significantly higher than it was. In June 2022, for those who don't have it in front of them, there were 1,999 acts, and June 2024, there were 2,740, which is a significant increase. We're not at the pre-COVID level, which is fine, but none of the car parks are at pre-COVID level. No transport systems are at pre-COVID level. but we are in a position where we're starting to recover towards it. And I do feel, yes, Surrey Road is the worst performing, but it always was the lowest performing of the park and rides. It always was that. But it's part of the transport suite. It's part of being able to provide that option for people across the district, not just those on one side of the city. The other fact with buses, you say that people would be using buses if it wasn't there. That route is not well served by buses. It does have a bus route or two along it, but it's not well served by any stretch of the imagination, just as nowhere is particularly well served. And I think this also goes to the point of this idea of cars per bus, is it's not just park and ride users on those buses. Everybody can use those buses. I've used those buses on a regular basis without actually using the car parking. It is a bus ticket that you buy as you park, and that bus ticket also is usable on other services as well. So I think there is more to looking at that than just sort of cutting the numbers any way you wish. I do agree with you to a certain extent, though, that it isn't a cause for saying yes, it's great, close the books on it, don't come back. I welcome the opportunity to come and see you every 3 to 6 months and talk about Surrey Park and Ride. I'm a glutton for punishment, but and it is a serious point. This level of scrutiny is important. We look to this, and when we're talking about it, when I talk to the officers, as Richard said, we talked about the marketing campaign. When we say, well, we're going to be reporting publicly on these figures, and we want to be able to show some results for that scrutiny committee. It serves an important purpose, and I thank you for that. I would actually say, because I didn't mention it earlier on, that Richard's point should be drawn out, that the success of the marketing around it, with a very, very limited and very cut down budget, I think as marketing is my profession. I think that's a fantastic result, and that awareness in the survey, you very rarely get to see results that are that stark. A 73% awareness of the resident rate amongst new users at Surrey Park and Ride compared to the others. I think the marketing team deserve some serious plaudits for that. So thank you.
Yeah. Go on.
I thought this when I read the report, and I forgot to say it, so Alex has reminded me helpfully. Should we not have the data alongside parking acts, but also have the data for actual number of passengers, to your point, because then we do want to get the visibility on the people who are not driving, they're just doing the ride. Is that possible?
Yes, I'll do that next time.
Yeah, sorry, it's something that we talked to Stagecoach, because obviously that's Stagecoach data rather than our own data. This is our own data we're able to report on. That would be getting a report from Stagecoach, I think.
We can get number of passengers on Park and Ride. We need Stagecoach data for foot passengers. The difference.
Yeah, that would be very useful. That would be very useful to have. Yeah, to know how many people are actually, are using it, not driving car. Yeah, because also how many passengers per car as well. If we're only getting one person per car, then that's not great. If we're getting 3 or 4 people per car, then that's better. And yes, Councillor Ricketts, it is really important that we scrutinise this regularly, along with other issues, because there is £400,000 being used as a subsidy, which, as Councillor Watkins said, could be, it's a choice, isn't it? It could be used on other things, so on other services. So that's why it's really important that comes to this. On one point, though, what do you think has to happen for this to improve, for it to be okay rather than disappointing? Councillor Watkins asked, how long do you go on with this?
Well, I don't think it is disappointing. I think it is improving. The point is, I suspect the point at which we say, okay, it's not improving rapidly enough, and that's something that we can discuss. But I think from where we took the decision to reopen Surrey Park and Ride, what we expected is, I think the results are slightly above our expectations, not above the top range. Let's put it this way, they're slightly above Richard's expectations and slightly below my expectations, and there is a bit of a gap between those, to be honest. The other point I would say in terms of that subsidy is it's not a straight zero-sum game. If we get rid of Park and Ride, we don't suddenly have £400,000 to throw back into the pot. As the report says, whatever you think about the environmental impact, is we would have to look at another 750 parking spaces. We would have to have issues in terms of what happens with the current parking infrastructure, and there may be an effect on other factors within the economy as well. Is having Park and Ride there is a benefit to the wider district. So it's not just a straight case of get rid of it and we save this amount of money. But I think we would get to the point where we look at the other, and they're mentioned in the report, all of the other pieces of transport infrastructure, things like bus lanes, things like electric vehicles. We balance the financial cost against the environmental cost, and then we can come to a better solution. I think these discussions are very important in that. I think what we can say is from where we were when we came here last time, we're broadly in the area we thought we were going to be. I think there are some signs that not only what we've done has been effective, but there are signs that show us how we can be more effective in the future. I think that some of the approaches taken in marketing have shown that we can do something in that area, as we talked about, speaking to local businesses, trying to boost that from the work that we do with the BID and various other groups as well, trying to encourage usage, and generally the transport strategies it moves. The wider parking figures show that people are certainly not parking in the most expensive car parks and parking in the cheaper ones. We've demonstrated a degree of flexibility in how people use our parking infrastructure. So we know that what we've done works so far, and it's given us a route to actually do more of that and improve the way that Park and Ride works in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Ricketts. And I think it's really important to note that this committee predominantly, I don't think it is an anti-Park and Ride. We're pro-Park and Ride. We just want it to work and not cost us a load of money. That's our ambition, is to make it work. But can I just go, because I've got a load of councillors. So Councillor Turnbull's next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks. Yes, I mean, it is worth, just as Councillor Watkins has been pointing out, we are here to look at Surrey Road Park and Ride. It's not about the other Park and Rides. It's specifically about that. And this report is a little bit, it does detract a bit from that, or distract a bit from that. The survey in particular, it's very difficult to tell anything from that because it's very small, and we can't tell what people at Surrey Road said as opposed to other things. I'm kind of thinking, I mean, we can count the number of cars which park there. We can count the number of journeys. We don't know what is the impact there. What is the impact having? Is there any decrease in traffic going into the city centre? I mean, obviously at the moment, it's early days. But in the longer term, have we got a baseline of this is what it's like now, and this is what we're hoping it's going to be like? How are we going to see that reduction? Is anybody monitoring that? And is there any impact on parking in the city centre? Is that reducing? Because those are the things that you would want to see, aren't they, if it's a successful service. We don't know if people are choosing specifically to drive there. There's some comments in the survey which are quite interesting. That I think someone's saying, well, I take the kids to school and it's cheaper for me to come here than it is to put them on the bus or whatever. It's something along those lines. So there's sort of indications that maybe if you bring in a group of people into town, it's going to be cheaper to drive in, get off and park there, and then get a Park and Ride than it would be for you all to come in on the bus. And again, that's that pricing issue where it is cheaper. The Park and Ride is cheap, and it is cheaper than bus routes, so it will take people off the buses and into the Park and Ride. We've talked before, and therefore creating more journeys, albeit outside the city centre. And the other aspect was that I was just about to mention, and it's gone completely out of my head, which you'd probably be very relieved to hear. No, I can't remember what it was. So I'll just have to leave that one. But yeah,
it's okay. You can always come back.
The impact. Yep, thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, it is difficult to tell what impact it has, except for the fact that you can say that those where the buses run and where the cars park, that you can assume that those cars would move on from Surrey into the centre of town. But it's a very small number of vehicles compared to the overall, as you can see from the figures on the carbon contribution of transport across the district. Even the amount that's added by the buses from the Park and Rides, that's a drop in the ocean compared to the amount generated by the rest of the transport going around the district. So it would be difficult to tell exactly what that is, except by saying the number of cars that park in Park and Ride clearly aren't driving on into the city centre. So yeah, there may be some wider effect than that. The substitution from one transport method to another is something that we pay attention to. It is more convenient. What we want to do is substitute people who would normally drive all the way in to driving part of the way in and getting a bus. If you're minded to get the bus, then it's probably more convenient for you to get the bus. If it's more convenient for the school run to park at a park and ride and then get the bus on the way forward, I think it's a huge number of those journeys would likely to be car journeys anyway. Anybody who's tried to get anywhere around Canterbury during school run time knows that it's the school run that is the main contributor to traffic. So if that is the case, as we're seeing from the survey, that it is useful for the school run, that reduces that congestion. We can do more work to work out where people are going, but there isn't any major evidence of substitution from bus to park and ride. What we can say is that there isn't any major evidence of substitution of city centre car parks necessarily losing trade to park and ride. But what we can say is that the overall number of acts everywhere is up. So more people are coming into the city. So yes, there's definitely a case that some people may choose not to drive and park into the city and use the park and ride as well. But actually what we can say is that more people are choosing to come in and use our car parks, be that park and ride or city centre car parks as well. So within that, what we're switching, we can see movement between individual car parks and we can see movement to park and ride because the number of acts are increasing. Where they necessarily have moved from to is difficult to do on a granular basis. But we can definitely see that more people are coming in, more people are using the car parks, and park and ride usage is up. So I think that's, where they're coming from and what they're doing is something we'll have to do more of those surveys over a period of time to find out.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Turnbull, did you remember?
It's actually slightly just coming back a bit, I think, on that. What about reduction of congestion into along the A28, which is obviously the aim of the game?
I can tell you that it's been reduced by the number of parking acts that are in the report. That's as much as I can say.
Yeah. We don't know that. You don't know that though, do you? With due respect, that councillor, because
well, you don't know that it's not
where
that,
people are coming from. We don't know who's parking there. We don't really know whether it's making any difference at all. I mean, it's a fact. You know that there are people parking there, but we don't know what they might have done.
You think they're going there just to go to the car park?
No, we know that they're going into town, but we don't know how they would have maybe done that before. I'm not saying that they're not coming in. I'm not saying that it isn't taking cars off the road. What I'm saying is we don't know for sure because we don't know for sure why they're parking there.
I think Richard can answer that.
What we do know is when it was closed, and we did surveys then, I can't remember if it went to this committee, and we surveyed where people were travelling alternatively, there was a mixture between those who were parking in the city centre and those who were parking at other park and ride sites. And a few found spaces on street, and I don't know where they are, otherwise I'd close them down. But so it is a fact that actually those people who park at park and ride, if it wasn't there, they would take longer journeys. Most of them would. In terms of the environmental impact of park and ride, it is very small. Let's not beat about the bush here. I think there's, don't quote me on this, I think it's about 16,000 vehicles travel in and out on that corridor. So we're talking very small numbers that we intercept. But that's not to say it's not necessary, because park and ride, if you look at our draft transport strategy that will hopefully be supporting the local plan over the next 15, 20 years, to make it work, we need to stop people driving into the city centre. It won't work otherwise. The only way we can do that is to reduce the amount of, take away that the attraction, if you like. So we need to reduce the amount of city centre and parking, and we need to provide to make sure that we don't, environmentally, kill ourselves as a city. We've got to provide alternatives. The alternatives will be bus, will be rail, but it will also be park and ride. So it's part of that longer strategy. We're talking short term, and the question that Alex was asked of when do you stop it? Actually, if we want our local plan to work, we've got to carry on with this strategy. There is no other strategy that anyone else has come up with.
Thank you. Yes, very quickly, because I've got lots of people.
Just a quick addendum to Richard's point is that the journeys that we also don't know about are the ones who choose not to travel in at all. And there was definitely a case of Surrey Road Park and Ride that we've heard from people saying, oh, that's great, I'm going to go into Canterbury again. It's a nice, easy option for people travelling from that part of Kent to come into Canterbury for a day out. And there certainly was the case that without that option, there were some journeys that simply didn't happen, which is probably part of the reason we're seeing a growth in overall parking acts as well. So.
Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you, Chair. I won't repeat everything that everyone's already said about the status of the park and ride, but I mean, as a ward councillor, there was a lot of residents who raised this with KG and I a lot. It is good to see a 24% increase, and hopefully that will continue to increase. Much like the passengers on these buses, we are on a journey here, and if we, sorry to be cheesy, I couldn't help it. But yeah, that's just a good thing to keep in mind. What I was going to ask is about the survey responses. What are going to happen with those now? Because there are some interesting responses on there. So I take it there's going to be more surveys done and more responses. And I just wonder what you're going to do with those.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. I'll come to Richard, but that's something that we can ask for. So I think when we come to the end, then if that's something, there's any particular surveys that you want, then we'll put that forward. But Richard.
So my team have analysed those, and there are some quick wins that we've already sorted out. Things like, vegetation clearance. We knew about it anyway, but it's been picked up, and we've done some cuts, and we're going to do some more, weed clearance and suppression and things like that. Other things that people have asked for, like extending the hours of operation. These will factor into the next contract. So it's a bit of a mixed bag between things that we can address now. And things that we can, hopefully address through the next contract. We can do more surveys. This was, a pretty snapshot survey that we did over the summer to get the results in time for this meeting. Normally, I'd do it longer and get a higher return rate. So hopefully, we can, have more time to do a better survey next time.
Thank you. And Councillor Prentice.
Thank you, Chair. There was a couple of points I just wanted to briefly touch on again. I just wanted to say also that I think the marketing effort has been very good, and I didn't make those comments previously. And I'm the sort of person who looks for these things, always probably biased towards looking at these things. So the fact that I have noticed them and I do think they've made a difference. I wanted to make a point about normal bus tickets as well, because I don't think that aspect of the service is promoted as well as it could be, and I've used the service in different directions to get to various parts of the outskirts of Canterbury when I've needed to go to whatever thing I've needed to go to. So, that's an aspect I'd like to see sort of promoted a little bit more. The fact that it does operate as a sort of mini network within the city, and I wondered how feasible that is within the current contract. Also looking to the future, the Surrey Link Road is looking like it's going to be started next year. I'm anticipating, I'm sure someone will tell me when the actual completion date is. I think we're looking at 2026, aren't we? Is there an opportunity when the Surrey Link Road is built for better direction to Surrey Road Park and Ride? Just using every opportunity we can to avoid people driving into the city with signage, electronic signage, traditional signage, so that people just don't carry on down the road. And again, I think Richard touched on later opening hours. I don't know what the current contract stipulates in terms of hours of operation, but naturally we do see a spike going up to Christmas. And the Christmas shopping season, would it be possible to have even late night Thursdays later running, other days of the week later running? Because obviously the city doesn't shut down at 7 p.m. and there could be an opportunity for additional income and obviously more usage of the site. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Prentice. I think good points there. And there was mention last year, wasn't there, of the pantomime bus. I don't know what has happened to that, whether that's going to happen.
Our dear leader just asked me the same question, actually. So there's nothing further to mention on that at the moment. But actually, in terms of late night stuff, I think Richard will take you. The other one is that when the contract came up last time, there was an idea of running the park and ride buses past both stations as well, which I think was a good idea, which was rejected due to cost last time. So there is a lot we can do when we renegotiate the contract. But the signage point for the Surrey Link Road is a really good one, actually. Go on, Richard, detail.
Yes, Richard.
No, I'm going to agree that the Surrey Relief Road, where it joins the A28, is very close to the Park and Ride, so it's ideally placed. Those people who say actually Surrey Road should be moved further out, actually, I've been saying all along, when that Relief Road comes in, it is the ideal place. I think having some late night services, particularly as a trial, would be really good if we market it well. We could do it on some of the the Christmas light switch on days and things like that. I think it'd be worthwhile. We need to get the costs to see if it's affordable, but I think it'd be a useful thing to try.
The Christmas carols in Rose Lane might be a good one. Yes, no, thank you for that. And yeah, I mean, I recall Councillor Ricketts sitting here actually as chair of Regeneration of Property and doing that meeting on the bus contract, and we had lots of great ideas in that. And sadly, I don't think any single one of them got in because of financial reasons. But I think they all need revisiting, and hopefully we get something workable out of them. Councillor Buckman.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, just a quick thing, really. I just think that it's not always a case of getting people to use public transport and the buses. It's actually getting them to trust them, that the actual buses will turn up when you want them to turn up. And I think the more people that use Park and Ride and the Surrey one, the more they'll believe in public transport again and start using trains and buses. And so it's, this modal shift's it's gonna take a long time, but it's gonna have to start somewhere. You can't. It's not going to make a lot of money. It's not going to have a lot of use at the start. It's just going to take time, and how much time we can give it is obviously an issue. But you have things like like passive housing that's meant to be is environmentally friendly, but that's sort of built with concrete and steel to start with. So the initial outset isn't very environmentally friendly either. But in the end, it does. I mean, yes, I'd like to see like the Park and Ride, yeah, for large events. It'd be great to some of the large events that are held, if it could be ran later, or if you opened up a little sort of quality cafe at the Surrey one to sort of attract people. And then also I was thinking about what people have been saying about the EV charging. I think that could be a problem if we did go totally electric, because there are issues with like battery storage. I mean, the price of electric will probably change how it's priced. It will go up more at nights now, because that's when most people will be drawing it. So where do you store the buses? Do you need more buses if they're on charge? And they are 17-20% heavier anyway. But I think we are where we are at the moment, and it's great that we are having these conversations. But sometimes there is more to it. We have to start somewhere. We have to draw this line and say, yes, we need less people having a reliance on cars and more of a reliance and trust in public transport. And if we do it here, I think it will succeed at some point. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Buckman. You all right with that? Any comment? Yeah. Okay. So Councillor Thomas next, and then Councillor.
It's not as much as questions as observations. Electric charging buses. Basically, when it comes to planning on a planning committee, a lot of the EDF can't supply enough power to charge your cars in the driveways. I live behind or in front of a bus depot in Herne Bay, and it can go to another company. I realise it's not just Stagecoach, but there is no infrastructure for electric charging in Herne Bay Station. I mean, they can put it all in. There's not even a solar panel on their roof to boost what the power's going to be and what they're going to save money on. So we need to make sure if they're going to offer service, they're going to have a problem if they supply the buses and stuff like that. When it comes to the new contract, do we start looking at less buses? One an hour, one every half hour. I mean, we got more buses running down. If we lose half those buses, that's half the pollution, half the cost, half this, half that. You know, and it's easy to go there. I mean, Stagecoach at the moment, behind me, I've got 50 buses in their car park. So to charge up 50 buses overnight is going to take a lot of power. And whether or not there's enough power in EDF in the grid or whatever, I mean, I'm not saying they can't. I'm just saying it's an observation. So if they say we can do this, that, and the other. Something a bit radical. I've said it several times, and I've said it to Richard. If you made the Surrey Road one way and Broadoak Road one way, however it would work, and that's a long route, and Richard has said they don't want to do it, this, that, and the other, that would free up the whole road. I mean, in my eyes, it makes perfect sense. From Surrey Road to Sainsbury's roundabout, something like that, you know, then you jump on a bus, you go straight through. And in fact, in some respects, thinking it takes the next stage, if you had a proper bus service, then you could jump on a bus, maybe from Herne Bay, wouldn't need the park and ride, and you can get a bus straight into Canterbury, and you won't get all the delays. It's just a thought. Some of the residents using the park and ride that I speak to live at Hove and stuff. I've got customers that live there. They have to use the park and ride because they're in a bus service. So in fact, they do drive there and use the bus park and ride because there isn't a bus service. If the bus service was there, they'd jump on a bus and probably use that. So there is a thing about hovering. And that comes to the next radical idea we're all here. I mean, this is no questions. This is radical ideas. And I've thought it through quite a bit, that we do away with 2 of the park and rides. It doesn't quite work for Surrey, my suggestion, but we're just going to build the new centre at the Dover Road. That's all going to be revamped, and there could be an opportunity to have more land there. And we have one outside the district, massive park and ride, Dover Road park and ride. You come in, and that's it. All right, for Herne Bay, it doesn't quite work. You've got to go all the way to Faversham. But if there's less traffic, sometimes it's quicker to drive to Canterbury, go to Faversham, Old Dover Park and ride. You get rid of Wincheap. You can even build houses on Wincheap. I don't know. Okay? And the problem you have got with Surrey is basically it's built on the car park's built on a tip. You can't develop it. You can't do much with it. But you can still have it as a car park. Okay? And the last thing, to shut me up, some of the people parking in there, they could actually be working in Currys. So maybe they are using the thing, but not using the bus service. It's just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Yeah, thank you for those ideas. I think that Alex is working on a lot of park and ride ideas, and also in the new local plan, there will be a lot more park and ride anyway. But Alex, yeah.
I mean, thank you. We're always happy to have a chat. I don't think I've got the political bravery to turn Broadoak Road and Surrey Road into a one-way system. I mean, Herne Bay Plaza was tough enough, wasn't it? I'm not sure. But I mean, but we do need these ideas. I think that you did remind me of one thing, which is why I wanted to respond. And it's UK Power Networks, not EDF at Herne Bay charging there. But they did move a lot of the buses that we use to park and ride from Dover to the Herne Bay route when Surrey reopened, which reduced the carbon cost in terms of when they were going home at the end of the night. So actually, there was an immediate impact that there were more buses serving the Canterbury area, so they were put to bed in Herne Bay rather than Dover. So there was a benefit early on in that. I don't know whether that figured into the figures, but I doubt it would make a huge difference to them. But what it does show is that through the way we're looking at changing our transport policy, then that actually has a knock-on effect to what the transport companies do in the area, and obviously people who work at that depot in Herne Bay. Not that we're in direct competition with Dover, but you know, it's. I'd rather they spent their night here than there. So thank you. We'll note all of those. They're all in the minutes. Have a look at those, Richard, and we'll.
Thank you, Councillor Ricketts. Councillor Franklin, I think you're probably the last one, because that will be an hour, and I think we've got a lot to move on to.
Right. So. Well, I mean, Councillor Thomas, I'll let you know that one-way systems will be quite a challenge, as I can tell you in Wincheap with residents and what they tell me with the gyratory. But going on from Councillor Buckman's point, you know, I think the slow take up of this, you know, can happen. You know, these things tend to be quite cultural in terms of how you interact with your community and your society. I mean, you know, if you look at America with how car-centric they are, trying to get them to go into public transport would be madness. But, you know, with at least here in Britain, I think there is much more of an opportunity and a possibility of transitioning people from cars into public transportation. But I just wanted to comment that I find it really odd in this sort of scrutiny debate that quite a few people from the Conservative benches and Greens are saying that this is going to be have an environmental challenge to this, you know, because my understanding was more people you get into buses, the better it is for the environment. You know, let's say on the worst case scenario, about 11,000 of these people for the past, since April to July, were just a single car with a single driver. That's a lot of traffic and a lot of individuals that are now taken out of the traffic in the city centre and now using public transportation to come in. So on environmental grounds, surely it's far better to have all these thousands of cars out of the traffic than it is, you know, having them in it. But also as well is the environmental point, the economic point, which is that, you know, at a better scenario where there's 2 passengers, 3 passengers, 4 passengers, that's a lot of people that are coming in then to actually contribute with the economy, supporting local businesses, supporting local shops, especially after the pandemic and the amount of stores that went under. Surely this is the kind of activity we want, that we want to see people engaging with the economy, growing the economy. And so the news that more people are parking in Canterbury, the fact that we got Story back and up and running is actually overall a net positive, not only on the environment, but the economy. And so, you know, what I'm hearing is a bit, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Franklin. I think the question that has been raised by members here tonight is that, yes, Park and Ride is great. It's just how many people do you have per bus? So it's parking acts per bus. So if you only have one person drives in and then one person on a double decker, then that's not a good. If you have loads of people drive in and a double decker's full, then that's great. So we're trying to get the balance between all of that, and that's what we're asking Councillor Ricketts about on the sort of environmental balance there. But Councillor Ricketts, did you want to just come in on that?
We can absolutely look at, there are wider factors to that in terms of the way that Stagecoach service contracts, in terms of providing that regularity. And Councillor Buckman's absolutely spot on to suggest it's reliability rather than price that dictates public transport usage. That's where it is. If you know that bus is going to turn up exactly at that time, and more importantly, drop you off at exactly the time it drops you off every day, then the bus becomes the absolute hero option for everybody. The issue we have, and that's the knock-on effect with congestion, is bus journey times across the district are often delayed and not delayed in a way that you can predict as well. So it is that reliability point. And I think that's the case with how they look at running the Park and Ride service, is the number of buses are there to ensure that it's a convenient service for people to go in. As part of that contract, obviously, we can talk to Stagecoach and see what they can do to rationalise that through the process as well. Just in terms of Councillor Franklin's point as well, he makes a very good point that actually we need to look at the number of people in those cars as well, because I think it's up to 6 people can get on with a Park and Ride ticket. So at £3.20 with the residence rate with 6 people, that's a little over 50p per person for a whole day in Canterbury, saving a huge amount of money that they can spend in the shops. So hopefully that'll appear in the press, free advertising.
Thank you, Councillor Ricketts. Okay, right. Well, I think that's the hour, so that's for you. I just had one thing, and it keeps being raised, is the difficulty of signing up for the residence rate, the hoops you have to jump through. I think that's one thing that could really do with looking at and simplifying, because if you have a residence rate, let's allow the residents to get the residence rate, not be put off having to jump through so many hurdles and having to prove that they're a resident. If they're on ANPR and you've got their postcode, then you should know where they are. But Councillor Baldock, you want to say?
I was only going to ask a fairly straightforward answer to this, and we all agree with you, but probably Richard can just summarise where we're going with that one.
Rate.
Where we're going with the residence rate, you know, and the difficulties we have and how we're trying to solve it.
Initially, there was a lot of difficulties. I haven't heard recently that there are. Let me know the details. Yeah, as I say, we can always, it'd be nice to make it as simple as possible. We do need some checks and balances in this day and age. I think it's absolutely right that we do ask people to show evidence of where they live, but it should be as straightforward as possible.
I think that would be great. Okay, so we have to note this report. Thank you all very much. I think it's been very useful. It's something this committee asked for. We've got a long way to go. We're only at the start with Storey Road Park and Ride. We have a few things. So Councillor Mackenzie would like to see some better surveys. So I think that's something that we don't need to discuss now, but we could, if you want to email me, Councillor Mackenzie and Councillor Turnbull, then we can look at that and feed that back on what sort of surveys we should have. So our next report comes in 6 months, and I think we have a few things as well. We want to look at Richard, can we add some information on the normal bus ticket data, please, and also on the number of people travelling by car and some of the other information from Stagecoach, I think would be really useful to have a bigger picture. Thank you. So can we note the report, please? Okay, noted. Right. Thank you all very much. I'd like to, I'd like to thank Richard Moore and Councillor Ricketts. Thank you very much. You can now have, if we now have a break for a couple of minutes just to shift around officers again. Thank you. Okay, if we're ready to carry on, although I've lost Andrea. Well, we be carrying on. Right, okay. So our next item, we've moved item 8, of course. So item 9 is the contract 6-monthly performance report, pages 68 to 76. And we're going to note the report of Tricia Marshall, Director of Corporate Services, and Sarah Randall, the Contracts Manager, but Sarah Randall's not here this evening as she is away. Also present to answer questions is David Maidenman, Managing Director at Konenko, and we're grateful to Councillor Charlotte Cornell, Cabinet Member for Council Services, Culture and Heritage, for being here to answer any questions as well. So can I invite Tricia, please, to make her report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Given the time, I think I'll keep this quite brief. So I'm going to start out by covering the report, which covers the period, the 6 months up to the end of March 24, so this year. And then David's going to come in and talk about current performance on refuse collection. So taking your mind back to October 23, this was the tail end of the strike and the recovery period from that. And then moving on from that, in January, we had the cyber incident, which, whilst it didn't affect Konenko's operations as such, it did affect our reporting mechanisms on the website. The council's website was down, as you'll remember, in that period, and that meant that people couldn't report their missed bins. So we have got 6 months performance information here, mixed of missed bins by the different waste streams, but that information is not based on people reporting it on the website, which is the usual practice. Moving on from there, there's the usual information on fly tipping, and then moving down through the grounds maintenance, the public convenience cleaning, again, a good performance there. That's a service which has now moved across in the current year to Konenko. They picked up that in, I think it was towards the end of June. And also the building cleaning contract, which again has been relet, but to the same contractor, who again are providing a good performance in that area. We've incorporated into that contract some of the housing communal areas, which I think is an improvement on the previous arrangements. So over to David to talk about current position.
Good evening. Thank you very much. I think everyone sort of will be aware of what has been happening and what's been happening in the last couple of months, particularly around refuse collection. So I just wanted to just sort of bring you up to speed a little bit about some of the background of that, what we did, where we did it, why we did it, and where we are and where the position is going forward. So what we basically did was we reorganised the refuse rounds only, and that also incorporated a lot of the communal properties. Why we did that? It was actually part of it's part of the industrial action resolution of last year in terms of affordability and just general efficiencies. Looking at the contract, and that was on our radar to do that right from 21-22. And the other main reason for doing this was that the rounds had not been actually changed for over 15 years. So we had a lot of inefficiency. And whilst you've spoken a lot earlier about environmental impact, the rounds were very, very inefficient. Crews were crossing over each other. And a lot of new properties have been built, so they needed reorganisation. We did this across the whole of the district, and when we made that change, there were actually no day changes to residents, and the rounds themselves, on average, retained around 50% of their previous work. So it wasn't each round having 100% new work. They weren't going into new areas that they didn't know. On average, I say, it was about around 50%. And the productivity levels that we set for that was roughly industry norms, and that was all based on performance and comparison, based on 20, 30 years of operational experience across this sector, and also in comparison to our neighbours across Kent as well. It all came into effect on July the 1st, and with the fortnightly collection, we moved through the first 2 cycles of alternate week collections. And through the first and second cycle through July, we wanted the crews to see their new rounds, but more importantly, we wanted the crews to settle into that performance. As we moved into August, that was a similar position again as to July, and whilst we were making improvements day on day, week on week, some of that performance did get a little bit clouded by annual leave through the August period. But again, we wanted to see the productivity. It became obviously clear towards the end of that 8-week period that the performance levels had plateaued and we needed to do something a little bit different and make a change. But before going to that change, what came out of that 8-week period was a lot of the base data within the Bartec system was quite inaccurate. Particularly the worst offenders were around communal properties, and that gave us a lot of the issues around I think what you guys saw as the emails and the contact from residents. It wasn't just communal properties, but that was the biggest problem. The crew knowledge was was an essential part of that, and a lot of that information that they had in their heads unfortunately was not in the system. And some elements of that we're still not able to incorporate into the system, but I'll come on to that in terms of how we are making improvements. So what do we do? From this Monday, from the 9th, up until that point, there was quite a bit of work that was not being completed on a daily basis, and that was rolling over into the next day. We put on additional resource to clear that, and any work that on the refuse that hadn't been managed to be collected on the collection day was then collected on the following day, and we pretty much had a 100% strike rate on that. But the net effect of that was it created a lot of emails, it created a lot of calls, it created a lot of uncertainty, and that's that situation we had to address and had to change.
not just from the volume of emails and possibly complaints that you were getting, but also from the sanity of our own team as well, I hasten to add. So from this Monday, Monday the 9th, following quite a lot of concerted effort over the weekend, we got any work that hadn't been completed last week cleared out at the weekend. We managed to clear all through what we call the access, what we call blocked access. So any roads that are subject to being dug up by the utility companies and we can't get into, we cleared all of those. We got the missed bins down to around a couple of hundred coming into Monday. So we got back to a decent baseline position. And what we did was a switch of the additional resource. So up until this point, the resource that had been working, if you like, the day after to clear up what hadn't been done, we moved that to the actual day of collection. So the net effect of that is, from Monday, we have completed the refuse collection on Monday, we've completed it on Tuesday, and we've completed that today as well. Yesterday we had no blocked access, and as of close of play this afternoon, we have roughly missed collections down to a more acceptable level of about 150. That will vary through the evening because they may get some more reported. But considering we were up to over around 600 on Saturday lunchtime, that is good. And blocked access today, we have 54 recycling collections outstanding and 50 refuse collections. Want to just emphasise that blocked access is nothing to do with the round reorganisation. That's just the day-to-day operational stuff that occurs, and we suffer as an impact of roads being dug up or burst water mains and things that just appear out of the blue. The most important thing I think to take from this week is getting back to that sort of stable state. Just relieves the pressure for everybody. We would naturally see a drop in emails, and we're seeing that. Excuse me. And working with the contracts team, the enforcement team, and working with Civica in particularly, it has a domino effect for everybody. So the most important thing is we get the bins collected on the day of collection, and that is the direction of travel, and that's what we've achieved the last couple of days. So that hopefully gives you an update on what we've done, and where we've been, and more importantly, what we've done this week and where we're going, and things are back on track. I shall leave it there.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you, Tricia. Yes, because I think for every member here, it's just been a disaster this summer, quite frankly. And I think all 39 of us have been absolutely deluged with complaints and trying to sort it out. And I think the worst ones are actually our most vulnerable residents, those with assisted collections and those living in communal properties where they've been really badly affected, particularly when it was very, very hot weather and people were just left with bin loads of stinking rubbish attracting vermin outside their properties in that very hot weather. So I think we'll have comments and questions now, and I'll ask Charlotte as well if she has anything she wants to say as Cabinet member. But I think as Chair of Scrutiny Committee, we need to find some way of addressing this so that this doesn't happen again, quite frankly. But Councillor Cornell, do you have something you would like to say?
Thank you very much, and thank you very much to David for offering the report on recent performance when it was not necessarily within the scope of the 6-monthly review. So I think that's much appreciated by everyone, as I'm sure we would have got many questions on that, and rightly so tonight. So thank you, David. As David mentioned at the beginning, these rounds hadn't been updated in 15 years, and the inefficiency was huge. They need to be updated more regularly than every 15 years, or you save up huge sort of logistical issues for the time when you do push the button and rearrange those routes. So when you do rearrange routes, personal knowledge And actually, I might ask David just to clarify what can and can't be stored on Bartek. So you're right, a lot of the personal knowledge held by our operatives is important for things like clinical collections or hidden placement of bins. How can systems be improved, and what data could possibly be held in the future that could help streamline some of those collections might also be something that people would be very interested in, and something that perhaps the Digital Inclusion Working Group might consider as it comes on stream this autumn. I think those might be interesting ideas to take forward, but it was a necessary piece of work. It was a well overdue strategic piece of work. It was really, I'm sure, very painful to do, not just for our residents who missed collections, but also for the inefficient way we fielded complaints through numerous sources: residents, waste collections, individual councillors emailing into Sarah. We've learnt a lot of lessons, I'm sure, and it won't be 15 years before we do it again. That's, I think, the biggest lesson learned is don't store up your problems for that long. I'll pass back to David. Just could you possibly illuminate what we can and can't store on Bartek, how that information held by the operatives is so successful to a successful round?
Yeah, thank you. If you could do that, David, and thank you, Charlotte. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I'll give some quick examples. The main challenge has been we tend to refer to a normal house, for if there is such a thing as a normal house, we call it a low-level property. Low-level properties, in the main, don't give us a problem. Where we have a problem is on the junctions of roads, or where the resident may put their bin out in the street behind or in the street at the side. Now, generally, everybody goes, yeah, well, that's not a problem, is it? And generally, sometimes it isn't. If it's the same crew who do the adjacent road and it's on the same day of collection. When it becomes a problem is if you live on Acacia Avenue and you stick your bin out on Smith Street, and Smith Street is done on a Wednesday, not a Tuesday, and it's done by round 4, not by round 3. Because the way the system is actually configured for the tablet, for the website, for the crews, is based on postcode. So your collection date when you go online will be based around Acacia Avenue, not Smith Street. So there's one classic example. We have examples, there are a number of people who will put their food caddy out in a different position to where they put their garden waste bin. And they will put their garden waste bin where they put in a different place to where they put their refuse bin, because the garden has a rear access, so they put naturally the garden at the bin at the rear of the property. These are issues that don't impact on every property, but it is a classic case of sort of Pareto's law, that small percentage of properties that do that create the major percentage of the problems. Communal properties has been a challenge in the sense, so all of that information is not visible to the crew, and that's what they carry around in their heads mainly for the low-level properties. On the communals, we had a number of situations. So the main one was how they're structured in the system was a group of properties, say, are set up as a communal. And we had examples of flats 1 to 10 had individual bins exactly identical as a low-level property. Flats 11 to 20 were using the communal, the larger four-wheel containers, in a bin store. The system didn't actually give us that level of information. So when we made the round changes, flats 1 to 10 on our system was down as using the communal bin store. So flats 1 to 10 did not appear on the front line round as having individual bins, and therefore needed to be picked up by crew 5. And that's why some of you would have had emails to say, we've seen the lorry go and empty the bin store, but they've just driven past and left my bin behind. So that's sort of one, that's been a big element. And a lot of that information, again, is in crew heads. And there's a lot of information around those locations that are in officers and crews' heads. And we're trying to now get that out of their heads and into the system. But we have some system restraints on that, which is something we're working through with the software supplier to see how we can improve that. But that is not necessarily an overnight fix. The other issue we had is that a flat or a group of communal properties may have 2 or 3 or even 4 bin stores. There's no location anywhere on our system to say that they have 4 bin stores and where those bin stores are. So when some of the crews change and they go round, again, the knowledge in the head is they know they find 3, but they don't find the 4th one. And that has been a bit of a problem. Now, again, putting all this in context, the volume of emails is high in proportion to where we've been, but they are issues that we are working through one by one, and we're improving day on day on that. And where they are coming up, we can address those, we can educate the crews. The challenge we have going forward is getting that into the system and getting the system modified. Otherwise, we're reliant on the weakest, still we're reliant on one element of the weakest link in the chain, which is it's still the driver and the crew's knowledge, because I can't hold that data in the system. We're working with the software supplier to see what changes can be made, whether it is purely a configuration with how we've set up and how the system has been set up, or whether it's actually a software improvement on the basis. I think it's more the former than the latter, because this issue would exist in every local authority, and the software system that we use is employed by a number of a lot of local authorities for waste collection. So we can't be totally unique on this, but I haven't got an answer on that for this evening. So hopefully that just gives some examples of what information we're reliant on the crews and the crews to have in their head. And emphasising Charlotte's point is, yes, we won't be waiting another 15 years for exactly this reason, because this is a problem that has been brewing and stored up. If we hadn't have done it now, we would need to be making changes in the coming years, because there are other challenges coming forward in the sense of communal food waste collections and stuff like that, and this would have surfaced at that point. So it's not avoidable. We've had to confront it head on. It's not an easy thing. It's been quite painful. It's been painful for everybody. And for everything that's happened, we certainly apologise for all that. It's not what we intended. It's not what we envisaged going into the round reorganisation. But I think as a result, we will come out of it with a far better system. We will come out of it with far better data, and we will come out of it stronger than we have been before, and back on to getting the service back onto a stable state.
Thank you. Thank you, David. I think one of the things is, obviously, with so much house building in the district, the rounds are going to have to get changed regularly anyway, aren't they, to meet all of that new demand. But I think one of the big issues has just been where crews have signed off roads being completed on Bartek when they haven't been completed, and then the frustration for someone, and this has actually happened to me, so I know it happens, of then going into the system and finding that their road shows as being collected when they've been left out and randomly. And I think that is one of the biggest frustrations, and that needs dealing with, so that when people go online, it shows whole road completed, they can actually say, no, mine wasn't completed for whatever reason. But anyway, I open it up now to anyone else. So I've got Councillor Prentice first, Councillor Jupe, Councillor Buckman, Councillor Mellish and Councillor Watkins. Okay, so and Councillor Edwards. So okay, I'll try and remember all of those. So.
Thank you, Chair. Is there any meaningful communication with residents when KCC inform us of highway closures for utility works? And I recognise this may be related to some of the issues David has just described with the round reorganisations. To give an example, Black Griffin Lane, just over the road, I just happen to live there, had fibre optic broadband cabling installed recently, but obviously the whole street was dug up and there was no access for bin lorries, which I totally understand. But as councillors, we all get the notification of road closures, not always in a very timely way. And so I just wonder if there's a line of communication that's broken there, because when some of us, including residents, including myself, got in touch with the council to ask what was going to happen on bin collection day, there didn't seem to be any awareness that our street was closed essentially because of the roadworks going on, and therefore what to do with the bins as a result. Now, they did get back to us, but they got back to us after the work had finished. And now I appreciate there was an awful lot going on and there was an awful lot of stress over the summer, but we sort of had to work it out for ourselves. And maybe this is a bit of a one-off. I would just like to know how that sort of chain of communication works, because I think residents do need some sort of special message when things like that happen. I did have another question which was about cleaning, but I'll bring that in later because.
Okay, thank you.
In simple answer, yes, we do get the notification on the advanced plan routine works. I think something to take away, which could be a possible enhancement, is whether we can get that information onto how that appears visible to a resident if they report any collection issues. That may help in that, but the main issue we generally have is it's the unplanned, it's the emergency stuff that tends to cause the problem. So it's the roadworks that will be there for a couple of hours or half a day or a day, not the sort of the long 2 to 3, 4 day planned closures.
Thank you.
I think on this particular occasion, KCC had notified us of work, but not necessarily in the most effective way. So I would just sort of issue a plea really to ensure that those notifications are received and in good time.
Thank you. And Councillor Jupe?
Hi, mine is on behalf of Councillor Lee Castle. He wanted to make sure that a thank you was mentioned to Carol Traxler, who is the lady who takes, I mean, it's not just Lee, I can see everyone's really appreciative of her patience and diligence with responding to all of our emails when things have been forgotten. I know he's been particularly affected in his particularly rural location where bins have been missed. And he's also asked, do we have data on it being broken down by council wards? I'm guessing you've looked at the data of where bins are missed and checked, you know, to see if you can change processes to make sure that rural locations and things aren't missed. But yeah, that was a question from him.
Thank you, Councillor Jupe. I think here, I think we all give our thanks to Ms. Traxler and the work that support she's given to all 39 of us across this summer. I would, yes, Councillor Cornell, did you want to comment?
This isn't hard data, but I'm obviously the cabinet member, and I receive lots of emails from multiple wards and have done for the past 2 months on this issue. Rural wards have been more impacted just because of the disparate, varied nature of the road. Often the ununiform way of leaving bins for retrieval. And when 50% of the round is new and 50% of the knowledge is lost, in rural wards that's been far more impactful because of, as I say, the lack of uniformity given rural layout. Yeah, so.
As a rural councillor, I would agree. Yeah. But maybe that's something that we could have next time is some sort of breakdown by ward of where the issues are. That might be useful for all of us. Thank you, Councillor Jupe. And Councillor Mellish, I think, was next.
Councillor Jupe, I was going to thank Carol for her. So it was been outstanding. She always gets back.
Can thank her again.
Yeah, really good. But my questions were on fly tipping and on playgrounds, if I may. I know it's a bit out of sequence maybe, but on the fly tipping, I noticed that the removals, there was 88% of removals in January, but then it drops down to 68% in March. And I was wondering why there was a 20% drop off in terms of removal of presumably reported fly tipping. And the one on playgrounds, on playgrounds was in terms of outstanding jobs. It seems, for instance, that in March there were 155 jobs on the go, as it were. 46 of those were completed, but that left 126 outstanding. The maths don't work. No, don't work out. I assume, is that because new jobs are coming on during that period?
Yes, Tricia, do you want to?
Thank you, Chair. I'll have to get back to you on the detailed data, but yes, new jobs will be coming on all the time with playgrounds. So there's probably if you want to do the maths, there's probably an extra line we need to put in there to actually make it possible for you to reconcile the numbers in that way. Going back to fly tipping, I'd have to come back to you on that one and get information from Sarah. But I know that it depends on the nature of the fly tip. I mean, there's no reason why the ones in March should require more specialist attention than the ones earlier in the year, but it could be that particular issues arose in that month. And for things like asbestos and tars and whatever, we have to get a specialist contractor in to clear those. So I'll find out and get back to you unless David's got the answer.
The only other thing that might come into play is just Easter. So there will be potentially slightly less working days, which might impact on the fly tip response for March. Don't think there's a seasonal weather impact with fly tips. Maybe, but I haven't looked at the data in that level.
Sorry. Only because it was a significant drop of, of 20%. If it was a few percentage points, you wouldn't really sort of worry.
Thank you. And Councillor Watkins.
Thanks, Chair. Actually, most of my comments are on the report, but just because it was helpful to get that update about the recent difficulties. I think the only other lesson to learn, and I do thank you for being frank about it, is just around the communication. I suppose looking back, I'm surprised that, given we get a weekly update from Leo, which is pretty thorough, that nothing was said in advance that we were doing this major reorganisation of all routes after 15 years. I mean, I try and read it thoroughly. Someone tell me if it was in there, but I don't think it was in there, right? So I just think that would have been helpful, because then as councillors, we do actually try and protect the officers, right? Because we get so many phone calls and emails, and I don't want to have to waste people's time, stuff I can sort out myself. And sometimes people just need the assurance to know there's been a change to the route and it'll be sorted out in a few weeks. But I couldn't say that because I didn't know it. And I think also, if I may say so, after I got a lot of complaints and I was going to the, let's just say, senior politicians of this council and making the case that what's wrong, and I was being told, no, I was unlucky, no, you're unlucky, everything's under control. And then 3 days later, Leo comes out with the email saying, oh, actually, there is a problem here and this is what we're doing to sort it. Again, all it is just communication, and I think that's the other lesson that could be learned here, right? It's really difficult. I think it was probably right to make the changes after 15 years from what I've heard tonight. Just the communication maybe could have been stronger. Anyway, actual questions on this report. I suppose what I was going to say is I can't really comment much on Kanenko's performance over the 6 months because there's no KPIs in there that I could see. And then also, there's no historical data. It'd be good to see, say, maybe the 12 months before. That way, if there's seasonality, you can adjust as well. So it's kind of quite hard. And that led me to think, are there any KPIs? And actually, a resident wrote to me and said they believe, and this is quite a techie point, but a very good one, I think, that we don't even have a contract between the council and Kanenko specifying the service level and KPIs. We're still relying on the original letter of intent, but it's been several years. So as well as commenting on the KPIs, could you just tell me if that's right? Because it would strike me that given this is a massive contract and an essential service, we should have a proper contract specifying these things. Thank you.
Tricia, do you want to?
Sorry. Just that my points were very similar.
Go on then.
Whether it be,
just
whether it be
Councillor Edward.
I don't know who I'm jumping in front of, but this is exactly the train of discussion I wanted to bring up. Shall I go now? Yeah. Thank you. I mean, I have had as many issues raised about the other half of this section, which is street cleansing. And just by the by, I do want to say that I have appreciated Leo's recent updates because they have enabled me to answer a lot of questions. So I do agree that a lot more information a bit earlier would have been helpful. But I have had as much about the issues to do with whether or not we know what to expect on street cleaning, on litter bins and dog poo bins being emptied, and whether or not we've got the contract. Now, I do believe we have probably all been primed by a similar source. There's been quite a lot on social media about all of this, and some of you may have seen it, and some of you may have know the one of the people who's putting a lot of this about. But the thing is, it has got around, and it is particular. So on the Grot Spots Facebook page, where a lot of people are complaining about litter that's not cleaned on the streets, about overflowing bins that seem not to get emptied on a regular basis, and the issue of whether or not we know what to expect, what that service contract is, if we do have one, what do we have, where do we see it, what kind of reporting mechanism. So how often are inspections conducted? I've got a range of questions that have come through to me. I've put them together on an email, but you know, what kind of performance reports are we expecting? There appeared to be a KPI reported about in June, I think to Scrutiny Sub, and that was saying that KPI 3.6 was failed and that we ought to have something done about it. I was expecting a report on that this time. It doesn't appear to be in here. So it's a kind of chain of things about, you know, what is happening about this committee, I guess, but us all generally, getting reports on KPIs, what KPIs we're expecting, what service delivery, and covering street cleaning as well as the bin collection services. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. And Councillor Turnbull, does yours fit in? No, you're going to come. And I would also say grounds maintenance as well fits in there as well. But Tricia, if you're able to answer that.
Thanks, Chair. I think there's a number of points there. Just turning to the communication point first, I think there's definitely lessons we can learn from the communication around this. I understand that we did put some information in the weekly update, but probably that was lost in amongst a whole range of other stuff, and we probably should have done more proactive standalone communication to you on this in advance so that you knew what was coming up. I think we didn't know until we were partway through the process about the issues with the quality of the data that we were holding on the system. I think if you've ever, no, we probably haven't ever experienced this before. If you've experienced this before and you've done rounds reviews and you've done day changes for people, that's when you really get problems, because we're all creatures of habit and we all like to put our bins out on the same day and continue to do that forever. We weren't doing day changes and therefore it was supposed to be much less disruptive, but then we found that we had these gaps in the data. But certainly we've learnt lessons about communication, and we would do more information up front for councillors, probably publicise to the public as well, just so that they're aware that things will be changing. So there's definitely lessons to be learnt there, Councillor Watkins. In terms of the report you get, I think that's been a bit of an accumulation over time. It's been the things that councillors have picked up and have shown an interest in, and we've added them in. So there's some, you know, it's a vast amount of work within these, I can't remember, 5 or 6 contracts. And in terms of making it manageable, we've focused in on the areas that councillors have shown an interest in before. So certainly if people would like data that's different, we can pick that up in future reports and we can change the focus. And actually that probably links through to what Peter's going to talk about later about how you can focus your attention in this committee. Because some areas in that report which are probably performing well each time, and you might say, well, actually, we're not really interested in hearing about that unless there's an issue, but what we would be interested in is this next time or that next time. So if you think there's concerns about street cleansing, that's something we can pick up in a future report and so on. So I think we need to make sure we're changing the focus and you're telling us about the areas that you're interested in advance of us doing that, so that we can pick that up and we can include that in the report for you so it does have the right focus. Turning to the issue of the contract, we don't have a contract in place, but we do have a letter of intent in place. if you think back to the history of Kanenko being set up, I think February 21. February 21 was the birth of Kanenko, start of Kanenko's operation, which was shortly followed by a snowstorm, if I remember. And then December 21, Serco, who were providing the grounds maintenance contract, I think it was in October 21, notified us they were handing the contract over in December 21. So a huge amount of work went into that. Obviously, a huge amount of work went into getting Kanenko set up and everything needed for that contract. Then a huge amount of work went into setting up grounds maintenance. And then the contracts team and Kanenko have been working together to improve the service. So yes, the contract is almost there, but it is not finalised. We do need to do that. We're aware of that. But it's a question of balancing priorities and having the resources to do that. But we will get to that. And obviously, since then, we've also been dealing with preparing for government's potential changes to refuse collection arrangements and also bringing the toilet cleaning contract into Kanenko because the issues we had with letting that contract when we put that out to tender earlier this year. So there's been an awful lot of work going on behind the scenes, which has meant we haven't got to that contract. That doesn't mean that Kanenko don't know what they're doing and don't know what we want them to do. They absolutely do. There's lots of detail and discussions and very clear expectations between the council and Kanenko, and David can probably talk about some of those to give you some examples of that. But in terms of things like bin frequencies and so on, that will be discussed, reviewed and tweaked. And actually, the benefit that you get from having Kanenko as a council-owned company means that you can get those changes in place relatively quickly, whereas if you had an external company, you'd probably be having contract negotiations over every single change that you want to make. So I don't know, Chair, if David can say a few words about that.
He can, and also I think Councillor Cornell does.
Sorry, I got an awful bad cough. So just in terms of, if I can just come back to the specification first. So just add that on to the contract being, or a contract, signed contract not being in place. We are working to a specification. So everything in terms of how Kanenko was built up, modelled, was based on a specification which the council put together in terms of what Kanenko was to deliver. We still operate to that specification. So we have specification over here and we have a contract that's got some signatures and some bits and pieces all wrapped up into it over here. The specification is not, they're naturally linked, but because the contract is not signed does not mean we ignore the specification. The specification can cover a number of things around frequencies, frequencies of activity, i.e. litter bins and things like that. It outlines the level of service that the council wanted to do, as in how many properties would be, say, on purple sacks, how many properties are on communal collections, what the collection frequency is. And that forms, the specification forms the basis of our day-to-day activity. Street cleansing is a slight enigma in itself in comparison to waste collection. Waste collection is, depending on what property you live, but in the main, you have a black bin that goes out 2 weeks and you have a recycling container that goes out the following week, and we come along and we pick it up every week in the main. Last 8 weeks taken with a pinch of salt, but I won't dwell on that. But in the main, that's what happens. So we would refer to that generally as a frequency. It's a frequency type. It's a frequency-based contract. The street cleansing, by definition, is defined as output-based. And on an output-based contract, you don't necessarily have a frequency. So whilst there is an indicative frequency that a particular road, a particular area may be cleaned every 4 weeks, every 3 months, it's only cleaned if it requires cleaning. A litter bin is arguably the same, but it's on an output base rather than a frequency. The challenge with some of the litter bins is we can empty a litter bin at 6 o'clock in the morning and by 9 o'clock it can be full again. So in areas where we don't have a continuous presence, that is sometimes hard to service. It's particularly hard to do on the coast, because in the summer months, we are emptying some of those litter bins in the high coastal areas. We're emptying them anything between 12 to 20 times a day. And I think that's not necessarily always understood when people visit or go around or they see something overflowing, particularly on the coast, that actually in the height of the summer holidays, that bin will be serviced, as I said, 12, 15, 20 times a day. Other areas, we are reliant on some reporting, and I'll come back to that in a mo. One of the other challenges is just the way that fast food and other social habits have changed over the years. So the traditional litter bin, if you get a few fast food containers in it, it will just block up. So the bin is sometimes is not actually used to its capacity. And then because somebody can't put something in it, they'll just put it by the side. We've had conversations, there's been a number of conversations with the previous administration, with this administration, with contracts team. The design and the style of litter bin is probably 40, 50, 60 years old, as is the same with most authorities. And going to a larger litter bin and something that's more suitable is again an affordability issue, which is another conversation with others. But if you go to a larger litter bin, then from my perspective, we then start getting to manual handling issues, because the size of the container, the height that you have to pull it out, it's not necessarily just always about weight, it's about the height you lift it out. And a number of the areas that we access, you cannot physically get a vehicle to it and lift that litter bin mechanically. So there's lots and lots of different sort of dynamics around anything. So we work closely with the contracts team in terms of establishing hotspots, and we also use everything that is reported through the website. We have access to like a map. So everything that gets reported comes into the system, which we can see that job. And then if there's anything, be it fly tip, be it overflowing litter bin, be it dog waste, we then can go and have a look at, we action that. And they are classified. Probably around 20, 30% is reported wrong, if I'm being honest. But it allows us to give a heat map, so we can see where a number of issues are continually being reported, and that allows us to change the frequency or to establish is that a seasonal issue, so therefore we change the frequency around the seasonal resource. The challenge with it is it's not always a science. We don't get it right 100% of the time, so therefore you will naturally get an overflowing litter bin. And that hopefully gives a little bit of explanation of why we sometimes see, or you will see, or you will get the complaint of what you're getting. The biggest issue we have around dog waste and some of these litter reported issues is the website works extremely well. It's great that you can do it on the phone and you can do it on the app, and it pins the location where you report it. The challenge is that a certain percentage of the public, through lack of understanding or knowledge, don't realise that. So they make a note of it and they report it when they get home. So we get probably over 50% of reported dog feces for us to go and collect are actually in people's lounges or on their front garden where they've actually reported it from home. So we can't always respond to those, and then people then ring up 2 weeks later or a week later or 3 days later. So I've reported this online and it's still there, but we don't know where is, because it's actually showing it's on their front garden. So that's one of our digital, well, not digital, it's a systems-y, type-y awareness issue.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for that.
On a night, sorry.
Otherwise, we're going to be another hour, and then we're going to be here till, well, we're going to be going home without finishing. But yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I think there are spots that just seem to get left over and over again, David. And again, there was someone today who'd been told their fly tipping had been removed, and I think every single one of us will have experienced this, and it's actually not removed, it's still there. I had one for 5 weeks that was reported every time we were told it had been cleared up. Very angry parish council. And I think we've all got examples of this, which is why we get so frustrated. But Councillor Cornell.
I'll circle back to Councillor Watkins' point about communication, and I love saying this to you, Dan. I agree. Yeah, absolutely agree. Lessons learned. And lots of lessons to learn. But it's a bit like, I suppose, a couple haven't moved house for 15 years. They book the van. They're absolutely sure they've got the van the right size. And then it turns out that both parties have been squirreling secret boxes in the attic, and no one knows what's in the attic till the day you move house. And I think that's sort of what happened with our operatives. They had so much information in their heads, Where's this? Where's that been? And we're learning just how much they'd retained. So I hope my house metaphor is useful. I'll use that in some of my emails replying this week. To your grot spots and getting some of the KPIs for street cleansing, that would be really helpful. And hopefully we can see that in the next report to this committee. Of course, there are certain Facebook groups where things become highlighted and highlighted again and highlighted again, and that focuses us in on a problem. On the other hand, this year on the coast, we cited lots of new litter bins as a sort of trial for where things might go on a more permanent basis. And we had far, far fewer complaints about coastal litter this year. I mean, if the KPIs and the sort of complaints metrics were here in the report, we might see some highlighting in some Canterbury areas, but equally, Herne Bay and Whitstable saw a huge drop in reported litter and overflowing bins. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cornell. Right, I've got four more left. So, or 5 more left. So, if we can rattle through them, please. Councillor Turnbull.
Thank you, Chair. First thing was just about the timing of this report, because obviously it's from October to March and we're just getting it in September. And I think, I don't know whether this is something which, Peter's going to sort of address, because you're talking about sort of scheduling of reports and things, but it does seem quite a long gap. It's been great to have that update from you, David. That's been really helpful. So thanks for providing that. But it would be nice to get this monitoring report closer to the dates of the actual, that they're actually being monitored in it. That was one point. Another point you mentioned in here about the recycling and contamination, and there are fewer things being hooked on bins, but does that mean some people are giving up? Can we tell what the recycling rate is, and whether there's been any people being put off recycling because of the contamination issue, and just thinking, I can't be bothered anymore, and just putting everything in the black bin? That was one. And the other thing is, well, we've had the Declaration of Biodiversity Emergency, so we're hoping to see some improvements in the management of the council's open spaces to improve opportunities for habitats for wildlife and for pollinators. How is this being implemented and monitored, and could this be included in future? Thanks.
I think that's Councillor Cornell. Or if it's not, then...
Oh, you turn off, sorry.
I mean, I'm not open spaces anymore, but potentially, yes. I mean, I might pass over to Tricia, because it's actually not my brief, that last one.
Yes, sorry, it's not your brief anymore. Tricia.
Thank you, Chair, but I'm going to attempt an answer, and it might actually bounce over to Peter, but who knows, he's frowning now. I think the recycling rates and the biodiversity issues would be more corporate plan type indicators. So they're ones that we report back through that mechanism rather than through this report, because this is about how well the service is being delivered rather than those council corporate outcomes. So yes, we do report on the recycling rates and percentages, but you'll see them through a different report. And biodiversity, again, would be picked up through corporate plan reporting, I think, but I will check with Peter.
Peter?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I haven't said anything all night. Yeah, so we do pick up on it in my final report, if we get to it tonight. We should just pick up on it. And there is that difference. So this report is historical and goes way back to, I think I say this every time this report comes, every 6 months I say this. This report goes back to about 2016 when Serco were going through, we think we've had it bad last couple of months. This is what it was like every day for about 2 years during that period. So it was really bad back then. And back then, the community committee, I think it was, asked for these reports to come through detailing what was happening. So these sort of stem from that. So they look at the performance of the contractor against how us as a business ask that contractor to deliver a specification, which is why you get really weird things in there that don't mean much to anyone other than between David and the council in terms of the relationship between those two. What Tricia's writing is the corporate plan looks at the impact of the services on residents. So that will cover things like a frequency of missed bins. Have you had 3 missed bins over the last 6 months, which is something that really impacts. If you've had 1 missed bin and it's one you've had ever, it doesn't matter whether you're in that mix. If you have it and you get that every time your bin gets collected or not collected, then that means there's a real trend and that's an issue for residents. So that picks up on that. Biodiversity impacts get picked up in that. Recycling rates get picked up within the corporate plan, because that's how the council wants to deliver better services to customers, as opposed to how effectively the contract's being delivered on behalf of the council.
Thank you. And
Can I just come quickly? Yeah, I thank you for that. That's helpful. I'm just kind of thinking. I suppose what I'm asking is, are there any implications for how Kanenko carries out its role? Are they being passed on? You know, in the view of the biodiversity emergency, for example, are they then passed on to? We'd like you to do this like this. We'd like you to do this like this. And I think that's probably something, an interface that I don't quite understand, is how that translates from an intention to what they're asked to do, because we'd hope that there are other opportunities for doing things differently and for training people to work differently and all those sorts of things, which it'd be nice to pick up.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, that's as I was saying earlier about the relationship between the council and Kanenko. That's where we would pick up, looking at, you know, mowing arrangements. Can we do different frequencies? We'd need to talk. The council would need to talk to Kanenko about it, because Kanenko needs to have different machines to do that sort of operation. How are we going to fund that? And the two sides work together to deliver that. But yes, that we work together to deliver those corporate objectives. And if there's issues around, you know, costs, then that comes back as a growth item back into the council. But it's very much working together, finding solutions. Because I mean, actually, David's ground maintenance team, I'm sure, actually want to do that sort of thing. But we need to give them the capacity to do that.
thank you. Thank you, Tricia. And then Councillor Buckman at last, I've got to you.
That's okay. No, I think we were saying thanks to a lot of people who get paid for doing things tonight, but I think we should make a note and say thanks for all the litter pickers out there who spend hours of their own time picking up loads and loads of rubbish and then putting it in bags and getting it collected, because I think they do like a really fantastic job all over the place. So that's that bit. But get down to sort of pavements and all the weeds in pavements. I mean, obviously they grow quicker in the summertime and when probably there's less staff around. And so I'm not actually sure what chemicals, if you use any chemicals to spray these weeds away, but it does cause like really big issues with like on older persons' housing or people with wheelchairs, mobility issues. So I'd like to see that dealt with quicker, really. And I'm not sure come autumn time how you can improve the collection of leaves everywhere, because I know collection around the city centre on leaves is pretty good, but around subways or out of town on small walking routes, it does take a lot of time, and I always get a lot of people emailing in about that sort of thing. So yeah, that just those things really. Thanks.
Thank you, Tricia. Oh, David.
The weeds issue is a KCC highways. We don't spray. We after KCC have sprayed, and I think that may have reduced the amount of spraying has probably reduced over the last 10 years with budget cuts. We remove weeds over a certain height when they're dead. The challenge around chemicals is anything you put down is what we would call, or what they would call, is a contact spray. It's a contact weed killer. So the weed has to be present. So there's nothing you put down to prevent weed growth. So the weeds have to come up and show for you to then spray them, which sounds a little bit counterintuitive in certain areas. But in essence, it's a KCC responsibility. I've forgotten the second part of your question. Leaves. Sorry, leaves. Leaves are always a challenge, and they are ours. We plan to always try and do areas around schools, around half-term time, certainly certain alleyways, Twittons, whatever the local name is, but we try and do those around half-term time. The challenge with leafing is no two leafing seasons are ever the same. We'll get an early, we'll get a late one, we'll get a prolonged one, we'll get a short one. They also don't get the memo we send them, so they don't come down in a nice even fashion which relates to our resource. So we end up with problems or challenges where with the demand or the emails that are coming in saying, can we go and help this area, it just becomes a resourcing issue. We employ, over the summer months, as many people will be aware on the coast, we employ seasonal people, and we do have seasonal people in Canterbury too. We deliberately hang on to those. We plan to hang on to those through October after the high summer season, and they go on to leafing work. So we have additional resource, but it's not a huge spreadsheet exercise. It never 2 years are ever the same, as I say. So it always has a few lumps and bumps in the road with leafing. Can't quite work out what's going to happen this year because sun is starting to come down. We've had a wet, warm summer, but we've had awful spring. Some stuff will come down early, and I will probably imagine the last lot to come down, which will be oak, will probably be hanging on in there till November, January at this rate.
Thank you, David. And Councillor Thomas, and then Councillor Brady, and then Councillor Prentice, and then we'll finish on this. Thank
Really
you.
quickly, I don't need an answer for this. Basically, it's about the litter collection, the street cleansing in Herne Bay, especially along the high street and all the off streets and stuff like that. During the summer months, it has been horrendous. I've got loads of emails which I've forwarded them on. Okay, but in the last few weeks, I've noticed that the town is starting to look tidier. So yes, let's keep on top of that. You are right. The weed killer that the council use can only be absorbed by the weed. If there's no weed there, it won't work. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas and Councillor Brady.
Thank you, Chair. I will be brief. 3 hours in and 3 substantive from 6 items down. So I'm hopefully we can get a practical resolution that I'd suggest for the reporting portal. Unfortunately, I had 5 purple bags missed in the last 7 weeks. I would report it every single time, and I won't go into the details of how long it took because we've had explanations for that. But one time I came home after 3 days, it said I had an email to say it had been collected. Fantastic, rejoice. Bells and whistles came back. It wasn't. So I went back onto the portal to try and report it again. And then the portal told me that because it's 72 hours after reporting it, I can't report it again. I did shout and swear a little bit at the portal. Can we extend that slightly? Because I don't know why, if it's a weekly collection, then after 3 days, if it hasn't been collected, maybe somebody gets back from holiday and it can be collected and you don't really want to have a bag 4 days just sat there with seagulls and animals and foxes, or there is a mistake that happened previously. So hopefully something practical can come out of my words this evening, and if we can extend it from 72 hours, that'd be great. Thank you.
David.
The aim will be is you don't get it missed. Then the 72-hour rule won't come into play because you won't have to ring up and report it or whatever time. But we can certainly we can take that away in terms of the reporting time. We have had a particular issue with purple sacks, which I haven't dwelled on because the bigger issue was communals, but we are working on a solution for that.
Thank you, David. And I think, as you said, Councillor Cornell, this is something for the Digital Inclusion Working Group. And Councillor Prentice.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a question about building cleaning. And I'm just probably referring to a particular example I was made aware of today regarding a council block of flats where they're meant to get the communal areas, the landings, lobby areas cleaned every week. But I've been told they've been cleaned 7 times since the 1st of May, which is obviously not weekly. And it should be every week. Just regarding the contractor, Town and Country, under the data, it talks about cleaning cupboards inspections and number of upheld complaints. How are these inspections made on the service that Town and Country is providing? Are things like spot checks done and sort of quality assurance? Because I have had complaints from residents about a particular area that's not been cleaned, certainly with the regularity it should have been. So are officers sort of following up the quality of the service that's being provided by this contractor? Because, this particular incident maybe should have been raised as a formal complaint. but I'm not sure if it has. But I'm just interested in that sort of quality assurance side of things.
Thank you, Councillor Prentice. Marie, you're going to answer that.
Thank you. This isn't a function for Canenco. This is a separate contract, obviously managed separately. If you can provide me the details by email, I'll look into it. But generally, we have housing officers, we have locality staff who are out and about, and they tend to do the spot checks and quality assurance for the block cleaning. But if there's an issue, email me where it is and we'll look into it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Right, well, I would like to thank David Maidman, particularly for coming this evening and giving us that update. It was very helpful. Thank you for that. And Councillor Cornell as well for speaking, and also Tricia Marshall for being here. We need to note this report. So I think we have a few things that to agree on to go in here. We'd like a ward breakdown. We want to look at KPIs, which is going to come up in item 8 later anyway, hopefully very briefly. Street cleansing, we would like a more, sorry, Peter, we'd like a more detailed look at street cleansing, and I think some other areas as well, and details on the finalisation of the contract. And I also think the performance report will be 24-25, will be in September 25. We could probably do with which we can come to in item 8, but we could probably do, given what's happened this summer, with a brief update at November or 6 months from now, just to know that we're back on track and that the issues we've been talking about, like Bartek, are actually working now. So if we could also note that. But anyway, are we all happy noting that report? Okay, thank you. Right, thank you very much for your time this evening. So we move on to item 10, Levelling Up Fund Quarterly Report, pages 77 to 90, and we're going... Sorry?
He said noted.
Sorry, what?
He just said noted.
Oh, right, sorry.
The councillor said.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah, noted. Yeah, thank you. No, we have to, well, we'll hear from Caroline Marlowe, who is Head of Digital Data and Improvement, and Councillor Cornell is here again. So probably briefly, because we've had a lot of updates on this recently, but anyway, let's see. Thank you, Caroline.
Welcome. In fact, that's 4 brief please and a noted before I even turn my mic on. So I'm reading the room, ladies and gents. To be fair, I was actually going to say I shall be concise because I do get to give an update at each of these committees, which we'll see later what Peter has to say, may or may not change, I don't know. So at 1.5 speed, as my children would have on their devices, broadly speaking, it is, and I do this every time, still going very well. Our expenditure is pretty much in line with where we expected it to be. You've all read the report and you will ask me questions if you have any particular ones. The thing I would probably say at the moment is we have a flurry of activity going on behind the scenes. We have got concept designs and REBA Stage 4 designs in the various different areas, all kind of coming to fruition around the same time, as was expected. So the officer group in turn are reviewing those and making amends, and then they're going through the rounds, but there'll probably be quite a lot you'll be able to see coming out soon. We've got 5 or 6 tender packages coming out any time between now and November, but we're still pretty confident that within that revised timeline, which we've noted here, which is automatically agreed, we did not request an extension, just for clarity, because I was asked that a few times. We're pretty confident that will all be done, and our grant funding will be spent within the timelines that are decreed, for want of a better word. The interesting thing at the moment, and probably the biggest risk area, and again it's in the report, but is just the complexity of the consent processes. So that, again, the type of projects that we're working on, they are numerous. Geographically, we've got a number of different ones, and it's Canterbury, and the majority of them need archaeology. I think we've got 13 sites, and I think of that, something like 9, I think, in the report, and I haven't got my reading glasses either, need 2-stage consent. So in the first instance, we need to ask Historic England if we can dig a test pit, and then, depending on what they find in the test pit, we have to ask again if we can do the works, which may or may not need to have some alterations depending on that. obviously there's risk in there and that's quite difficult to quantify. However, I would reiterate that we're working hand in glove with Historic England and have been throughout the piece. But, the relationship is very positive. They've been, really honest and pragmatic. Again, with the faculty, that lost the word. So we are as confident as we can be that the consents will follow once we've managed to sort of tweak the designs if that becomes necessary. So it's probably the kind of the key area that we're keeping an eye on. But again, by the time we come around to the next report, I'll probably have quite a lot more to tell you on that. So I'm going to stop because brief. And if there are any questions, please do say.
Thank you. Thank you, Caroline, very much. And Councillor Cornell, do you have anything to add? I know you've been talking recently about the issue of consents.
Yep, the Levelling Up team, Connected Canterbury team continue to do a fantastic job. I think we're all excited to see the new designs and the new images, and I'm sure our residents will have a lot to say and feedback to us all when those are revealed. Again, in Canterbury, as Caroline rightly says, archaeology, you dig down a metre and you're going to hit a Roman or a dead monk. So securing permissions from Historic England or the archaeological trusts out there is complex, and KCC into the mix, and Stagecoach if they choose to reply. Things can be held up, things can go slower than we anticipate, but we're still on track to deliver what we promised.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any question, or you're all happy with that? And we'll wait for the next quarterly report and we can talk about the bus station then. Yes, Councillor Franklin, go on.
I mean, I can send a written question if that would be more preferable for the hour.
Now you're talking.
Yeah? Yeah, I'll send an email.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Right, okay, so are we all happy and we're noting that report? Noted, thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Cornell, for your time this evening, and thank you very much, Caroline, for being here this evening, albeit only but next time, hopefully, we can have a better update, bigger update, and hopefully more on the bus station particularly and Westgate. Right, item 11, financial outturn reports 23-24, pages 91 to 114. We're noting the report of Nikki Mills, Service Director Finance, and Rob May, Head of Finance. And we have Councillor, the leader, Councillor Alan Baldock here in Councillor Sol's absence, in case there are any questions. So Nikki is Rob. Yes, go ahead. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Chair. So firstly, I'd like to apologise for bringing these reports to you at a later meeting than we would normally. This is just a reflection of the cyber incident, which we are still feeling the effects from. This report is to note the position of the General Fund and housing capital spending for 23-24, identifying any schemes that have slipped, and to note the carry forwards of the budget. This slippage is not an indication of overspend, but a reflection to changes in timing of the spending. If any projects are over or underspent, this is shown in the final column of the table shown in the report. So onto the detail. The total slippage for General Fund is 12.6 million and an overspend of 352,000 as detailed in the report. The main overspend in capital is due to Beach Street costs while the site becomes ready, and lease costs could be recovered through the sale. We don't request carry forwards in respect of the housing revenue account, as it's zero based each year. The outturn shows an underspend of 2.1 million, mainly due to works that are happening in this financial year. Shall I go on to the other report? Do you want me to stop there on that report, or do you want me to continue?
I think that's probably. Was everyone okay with that?
So that's
yes.
The capital section. Do you want me to move straight on?
Yes, that would be great. Thank you.
So onto the revenue outturn report. This report is to note the General Fund revenue account and the housing account for 23-24. It continues to be a difficult year where the council continues to feel the impact of wider economics that I'm sure you're all aware of. During the budget setting process for 23-24, we budgeted 400,000 would be needed from the budget stabilisation reserve. The provisional outturn, after taking this into account, identifies an overspend of 469,000. This will be funded from the Commercial Stabilisation Reserve, there to fund short-term overspends. We continue to try and reduce the overspend and monitor every budget regularly, either monthly or quarterly, to keep on top of any spends. In respect of the housing revenue account, the outturn shows a surplus of 213,000 against a budgeted deficit of 82,000. This is slightly improved position than we expected and shows that the improvements that have been put in place over the last year or so are starting to show results in the finances, which we will continue to monitor and hopefully improve even more so. More detailed commentary on both outturns can be found in the body of the report and the appendices. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Rob. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask? Yes, Councillor Mellish. No, go on. No, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay. Just actually on page 92 of the report, it's the first time I've heard the Tivoli referred to as an arcade. The wreck that it is, and but sounds quite implicit. The real question is that towards the bottom there about the carry forward and about the Herne Bay Pier redevelopment. I'm not sure what that is. Can you sort of either now or in an email to me explain what's happening there, or is it being referred to another? Is it the plaza? What is it? Yeah.
Well. Councillor Baldock, I have a feeling it's the engineering works that have been on that capital budget for about 8 years or so.
That's how I read it. Is that correct? Yeah. So and of course that we're working our way through that now, aren't we? You know, we're digging holes to make sure things don't fall in the sea and the like now. So yeah, I think it's got to be there because we don't know what we're going to find, do we? That's fine.
Yeah, Nikki, that's correct, isn't it? It's been sitting there for years, waiting to go.
Sorry, Chair. So it's the ironwork, as it were, supporting the pier, rather than using the word redevelopment. I think it's something we don't know about. So it is actually about whether it's corroding or not. And yeah, okay.
Yes, it's below. Nothing glamorous on the top, I'm afraid, Councillor Mellish. Does anyone have any other comments? Yes, Councillor Watkins.
I do have two questions on Herne Bay, but I will just email them in because they are simple to be answered, I think, and they're on the report. The one thing that's slightly surprised by is that we're making a significant loss on running South Quay Shed, which, you know, it's good facility. I go there from time to time. I suppose I don't really understand why we're running it. Councils often get involved with running food and drink arcades. Is there, and we're making a loss, is there a plan to look at getting a market or a private or charitable operator in so that we stop making the loss? Is that the long-term vision?
Councillor Baldock and then...
I think the steer from that is the harbour board, isn't it? So...
Nikki, yeah.
Yes, sorry, thank you, Chair. Yeah, the Harbour Board agreed for running it in-house for a period of time, which I believe was 2 years, and then they would review it and see how it's going in-house and see what the options are thereafter.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Baldock. And yeah, are there any other comments or questions? I think I just have one, which is really, I know the HRA is still not in a great position, but it's good to see that it's actually on the way to a substantial improvement actually from where it was. So I think that's worth noting, and I think no huge amount of work has gone into that over the past few years to really stabilise that account and actually get us to a position where we're actually able to use the HRA to do what it should be doing and buying properties for people to live in and build our social housing. So yeah, I think on behalf of all the committee, I probably would like to congratulate everyone on that. I know there's a long way to go, but first steps, it's a good move. Yes, Councillor Ball.
I was just going to say, I totally agree. I think we're slowly turning or shutting the door on East Kent housing and a terrible legacy that it's taken so long to get through. And yeah, and getting back to what 800 or plus thousand back in reserve rather than, you know, it's we're a little bit safer, aren't we? So we can go for it. That's good.
So congratulations to everyone on that. So if there's nothing else, then can we note that report, please? And that's going to that will go to the budget for next year anyway. Right, final item. If you can all just hang on in there, which is actually for this committee is probably one of the most important items on this agenda this evening. You're right, Peter? Oh yes, you're talking to yeah. So Peter Davis, Director of Strategy and Improvement, is going to give a key topics update for us, because obviously this committee is changing how it's going to operate and what it's looking at. We're now a committee for a start, but also with the changing corporate plan, that means that this is what we've had tonight, this very long agenda where we're now nearly at 10:30. This is the old format, and we'll now be moving to a new format of scrutiny committee. So Peter is going to just talk us through the plans for that.
Yeah, and I will try and be quick. Although I don't think enough's been made of the fact you're a committee tonight, but you are now a scrutiny committee, and you have your main role to play. In conversation with the chair and vice chair, we've gone through and tried to work out how we can make the committee more effective in the way that you can actually provide scrutiny and not feel that you're rushed towards the end of a meeting because you're 3.5 hours in, but also look at how the role of the scrutiny committee can particularly be on holding the administration to account, which is a primary role of the committee, and make sure that the corporate ambitions are really being challenged on over the term of the administration. He says not being able to do that. Apologies if you can't read this too well, but again, it sets out your primary roles are scrutinising performance, scrutinising finances. You've done 2 parts of that already tonight, and exercising calling arrangements, which hopefully we don't do too often, but it is but ultimately is to hold the administration to account over the way it delivers the performance of the business. Current practice, and tonight is a really good example of how over many, many years, officers bring reports, but then officers never stop bringing reports. And we bring the same reports, and there's not really any challenge or critical thought into why something's come in and what the purpose of that report is. Officers are very good at bringing something and keep doing stuff until they're told to stop, but unfortunately they're never often told to stop, and we end up, and I think Councillor Edwards made the point that what's the point of some of this? There's no performance data in there. It's just, the information that we're good at collecting, and we'll provide that to you, and hopefully that might resonate with something you're interested in. Years and years of lots of different various reports have now got to the point where we're overloading the committee with information. You're not able to provide the proper scrutiny function because you're getting 45-page reports, and even with best will in the world, you're not able to get through those and provide the function in the same sort of way. So again, through conversation, we've discussed how we can make the report simpler, how we can give more bullet pointed, what's worked well, what's not worked so well, and try and give an open, honest, and with the commitment that cabinet members will come along to support officers on the political role of the council in delivering as well. So the proposed scrutiny arrangements are to give you more chance to take a deep dive. And actually tonight, you've probably taken a deep dive into 2 or 3 relatively large topics, which you could have spent a bit longer on. I think Rachel did well at trying to hold you to about an hour on some pretty heavy topics, but you could have had about an hour and a half, 2 hours on 1 or 2 of those, and probably had done, spent a bit more time with the portfolio holder on what they're trying to get to. And the one with Alex was a good one on what's the longer term ambitions, how are you going to achieve those, how is the performance you've had in the past helping to set the targets and ambitions going forward. So Chair and Vice Chair come together and are particularly keen on the function of the committee to focus on 4 key areas: environment, I'll pick up a bit more detail in a second, housing and services, transport, and then finance, projects and performance, which all picks up the catch-all of the purpose of scrutiny. Environment covers that list of things. Obviously, you'd expect climate change to be in there, but it picks up, as Claire was saying earlier, about biodiversity. We've got an emergency. What's happening? When's stuff happening? What's coming through on that? There is a strategy being developed. Gives you an opportunity to look at that at early stages. We know air quality, open spaces within the corporate plan for the administration. Water quality, recycling are really big topics. Again, they get lost sometimes within the body of bigger reports. So how do we sort of get more of a structured understanding of what's going on there? Housing and services. Council housing, we know, is still big. You get a lot of housing reports through, but they tend to focus again on officer information rather than council or resident sort of important information. So we give you lots of information on compliance and gas checks and stuff, but actually things on some of the topics you've been interested in. You talk to us about, I don't know, in the corporate plan around voids and turnover, how quickly we're getting people into council housing, how best is that happening, housing needs register, how large is it, what work's being done by administration to build, buy, develop housing, which is in the corporate plan. Again, giving you a chance to talk more about some of those meatier subjects rather than some of the very detailed in-service performance that gets picked up through other mechanisms. Markets, again, administration have opened up a country market. Scrutiny Vice Chair and Chair would like to understand what's happening on that. Is that being rolled out further? What sort of metrics and performance and information is being used to look at success? And contracts in general, and again, we sort of spoke about that a bit earlier, so I won't dwell. Transport, you've already looked at Park and Ride. We know there's emerging bus strategy. Councillor Harvey picked up on that earlier, so what is happening? What's the longer term ambitions? You can look at Story Road, but actually we're looking into the, bus lanes and all sorts of things that are coming out through the transport strategy. What's the role of scrutiny to make sure that that's being held to account, but also driving forward those ambitions. And in general, car park performance and financial data. Richard said it earlier, we rely heavily on the performance of our car parks, and that can make or break our budgets. And we also know it can make or break our city and town centres. So there's a lot of information that we get from car parking that could be used to help inform the committee in making recommendations and supporting portfolio holders in delivering their briefs. And then the last one, you heard from Caroline, Levelling Up Fund. We also know that there's interest in what's happening through the Shared Prosperity Fund, and we probably don't talk about that as much as we should. Lots of the corporate plan, early ambitions are being driven on the growth agenda through Shared Prosperity Fund. Financial outturn we have to bring through. We could be better. And actually, tonight's was a good report because it was succinct. It was led. Here's some information that you need to know about ups and downs. And then you can talk around those, how we can give you information to help sort of shape the scrutiny role for you and the corporate plan and annual report, which are come in a different format to allow you to see what's worked well and bring case studies as opposed to just performance information. So you can see the real life impact of the corporate plan rather than just sort of 1% increase, which is meaningless in the grand scheme of things for residents. Timetabling, this is where it gets a bit interesting, or not so. And again, we're making sure this is shared. Rather than try and squeeze everything into one evening, and by the end of it, you're not able to provide the scrutiny function because you're going to send written responses in rather than actually do it on the night. We're proposing to spread it a bit more over the course of years. So each cycle, May, September, October, November, depending when it goes, and March, we'll bring the same type of information. So the first cycle will always be housing and services. The second cycle will always pick up the finance, projects and performance. The third cycle will always pick up environment, and fourth cycle transport, but bring more detailed information on those key topic areas that we discussed earlier. That's not to say that you're only ever going to find anything to do with, what's one of the last ones, contracts in May 2028. You will get other information, but more sort of top level, what's worked well, what's not worked well in a covering report, but give you the opportunity through the bulk of the meeting to go heavily into the detail and the general direction of travel with the portfolio on that general topic area. And we'll make sure that's covered off in sort of detail. There'll be, presentations, slides, information, but sort of giving you the opportunity to talk about that over longer, over a bit more time. but with a general overarching report that pick up the other areas that fit within those cycles. And the finance projects and performance will be a catch-all. So again, where you're like tonight, you've said, we'd like to have a bit more information, X, Y, and Z, we can make sure that's fed through. So again, there's always, at least within 6 months, an opportunity for extra reports or information to come through to support what you've already heard about earlier in the year. So following this meeting, we'll update the full plan. We'll make sure that we keep that, that page I just showed on the agenda, so that you've always got an opportunity to see what's coming up next, and make sure if there's information you want to particularly see covered off on that topic, it gives us at least a month or two as officers to pull that together, and the portfolio holder a chance to talk about it. We'll ensure that the officers are in attendance, and we can better plan in for portfolio holders to attend. I mean, we had half a cabinet here tonight, which is not sustainable in the sense of trying to keep the business of the council going. And the next meeting will have a focus on environment with a real deep dive into the biodiversity emergency and the open spaces agenda. And I already know Martin Hall's going to be here, so it will be a good meeting because everybody likes the reports and presentations that Martin brings along. It'll be very interesting, very detailed, pick up the work of the biodiversity working group and the biodiversity strategy that's been developed. So already, you know, there's work being done on what you're going to get in the next couple of months, which will give you a lot more time and information to talk about a single item with a wraparound around what's happening on the environment agenda, covering off climate change, air quality, etc. as well. I think that was it.
Okay, so can we note that? Any comments?
I think the Cabinet are genuinely excited by the opportunity to do that. I think it's because politics is much more nuanced than we do. And I think, you know, we want to discuss what we do in the scrutiny thing, nuanced in the concept of the bigger picture that we have as a vision for an administration as well. So it all kind of leads together and gives us the opportunity for you to actually do the job properly. And we're really excited by that. So that's really good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Baldock. Yes, let's hope so. And what I would just say is that it allows us to have these deep dives. So if any one of you, knowing what's coming up on the forward plan, wants to see anything specific in a report, please let me know, and Claire, and we can ask the officers to do that. So these reports are much more led by the scrutiny committee than led by officers. It's up to us to drive that report and what we think is important that we need to be scrutinising in the operation of the council. So hopefully it gives us more flexibility. Anyway, I know everybody wants to get off. We're all exhausted. And the whole idea is that future scrutinies, we can get right to the end feeling on top of the scrutiny rather than that we just want to go to bed. So there's so much... It's so much, I mean, it's go to sleep. It's just, it's information overload otherwise, I think, for everyone with so many reports this evening having to go through. But there's no other urgent business to be dealt with. I don't need to exclude the press and public. And there's no other business which falls under the exempt provisions of the Local Government Act 1972 or the Freedom of Information Act 2000 or both. And the date of the next meeting, as we've just heard, is 7 p.m. on Wednesday, 27th of November 2024. And we will try to get out of here at a decent earlier time. But thank you all very much for your input this evening.